First of all, can I welcome everybody to the Governance and Audit Committee meeting today. This meeting is, if you like, reconvened from the postponed meeting of the 8th of May, which was due to councillors having other commitments as it was VE Day. Following the full council AGM on the 15th of May, a supplementary agenda has been issued, and the first item is to elect the chair. Can I ask, where possible, all of the committee members have their... Sorry, Councillor Graham? You're on mute, Councillor Graham.
Apologies. I'd like to make a proposal on the position of chair that Councillor Lynn Hamilton be re-elected.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Graham. I was just getting that we have had now 4 nominations for Lynn Hamilton to be re-elected as chair for the ensuing year. In accordance with the Constitution, the chair of Governance and Audit Committee should be a lay member. I just want to make sure if there are any other nominations. If not, Lynn, do you accept the nomination for chair?
Thank you. Yes, thank you very much, colleagues, for the vote of confidence in my chairmanship. Thank you.
Okay, please can I have a proposer and a seconder? Councillor Peach, you proposing?
No, I just...
Yes, I am, Kath. Yep.
Yeah, and Councillor Graham, can I take you as seconder?
Yeah, fine.
Okay, for the committee members, can I have a show of hands? I don't think there's any against. And no abstentions. Therefore, Lynn, you're duly elected as chair for the ensuing year for the Governance and Audit Committee. At this point, do you want me to hand over, or do you want me to continue to do the election for vice chair?
Kath, if you could just continue with the vice chair election.
Fine.
That's absolutely perfect for me.
Okay. Similarly, we have had 3 nominations for John Broughtagam to be vice chair of the committee for the ensuing year. Are there any other nominations from committee members? No. John, do you accept the nomination for vice chair? Yes.
Yes, I'm honoured to do so.
Okay, thank you. Please, can I have a proposer from committee members? Councillor Graham and Councillor Peat, is that okay for proposer and seconder?
Yes, I'm happy to second Lynn. Kath, sorry, got ahead of myself.
Okay, and can I have a show of hands from the committee members? Thank you again. I think that's unanimous, and therefore John is duly elected as the vice chair for Governance and Audit Committee for the ensuing year. I don't think there was any abstentions, was there? No. Therefore, Lynn, can I hand over to you to take the rest of the meeting?
Thanks very much, Kath, and thanks everyone. So welcome to the postponed May meeting of Governance and Audit Committee, and as Kath explained earlier, this postponement was due to clashes with the very important VE Day commemorations and elected members' commitments in that regard. Regrettably, because of the rescheduling, a couple of items have had to be postponed, item 11 and item 18, and we will reschedule those items as quickly as we reasonably can. As we open this meeting today, I would like to formally welcome Councillor Claire Johnson-Wood and Councillor Adam Kennerley to the membership of the Governance and Audit Committee, and to thank colleagues who have previously been members of the committee for their service, Gareth Ratcliffe and Councillor Elwyn, both changing their responsibilities, so grateful for their service on the committee over the past couple of years. We have apologies from Councillor William, and as a member of the committee, and Carrie Ann, do we have any other apologies?
Yes, Chair, we've got apologies from officers Nina Davis, Diane Reynolds, Matt Perry, Anne Phillips, and Yvette Cotton.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Carrie-Anne, if those could be recorded. Item 2, colleagues, are there any disclosures of interest in connection with the agenda for today's meeting? If people could show their hands if there are any declarations. Disclosures of interest? No? Okay, thank you very much. I'll move us on to item 3. And item 3 comprises 2 sets of minutes, the minutes of our minutes of the 5th of March and the minutes of the 27th of March. If I could take these in order, please. So first off, I'm asking for any points of clarification, matters arising or correction in connection with the 5th of March meeting. John, I can see your hand is up.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, page 10, there are 3 items there where some action was required. I think a gentle reminder might be useful.
Thank you very much, Carrie-Anne. If you could take that gentle reminder and ask for the actions to be updated and advice to be provided to the committee, please. Anything else on the minute of the 5th of March? If not, is Governance and Audit Committee happy to agree the minute of the 5th of March? Do I have a proposer? Pete as a proposer, John as a seconder.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much. Moving on to the minute of the 27th of March. Any points of correction, clarification, or matters arising from that minute? Pete, Councillor Pete.
Thank you, Chair. Just a minor correction under item 9 on the minutes, the whistleblowing working group. I think the first line should read still being worked on as opposed to still be.
Yeah. Just a small typo point there
Yeah.
that we can pick up. Thank you very much, Pete, for that. Anything else on that minute? From me, on item 3 of the minute, the last action point in connection with amendments or adjustments, reprioritisation to the annual audit plan. I think it is worth noting that Governance and Audit Committee is responsible for approving the annual audit plan, therefore ought to have a role in certainly being advised on any adjustments and being assured that those changes or reprioritisation are taken at an appropriate level. And I would like the action point in connection with that discussion to be discharged, and for a short paper to be brought to committee, an assurance paper to be brought to committee over the next couple of months, please. If you could just note that, Carrie-Anne, thank you very much. Jane, I can see your hands up.
Just to say, I'll bring that forward, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Jane, much appreciated. Is there anything else on the minute of the 27th of March? In which case, is committee content to approve that minute? Can I have a proposer and a seconder, please?
Propose.
John and Pete, thank you very much. Thank you. We'll move on to agenda item 4, and agenda item 4 is the first of the items for our Audit Wales colleagues. And the first item is the Powys annual audit summary, and Gareth Jones, one of our Audit Wales colleagues, is going to introduce that item, and then I'll invite questions. Gareth, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. And the report, this report summarises all of the published Audit Wales outputs since the previous summary that was presented in February 2024. The committee has already received all of the reports listed within the summary from Audit Wales officers in previous meetings, and the report also includes links to all of the national reports issued by Audit Wales in 2024. I would draw committee's attention to the Brownfield Regeneration Report, which the committee will receive later on during this agenda. So, Chair, if there are any questions, I will obviously respond to those.
Thank you very much, Gareth. I can see John has a question. John, can you, if you would?
Yeah, thank
John,
you,
and then Pete.
My question arises from item on page 65, which talks about a planning review follow-up. There was an adverse planning report in, I think, 2023, which was followed up in 2024 with a very much more favourable document. I was, however, though rather disturbed to see in the press late last month that our local member for the Senedd had written to the Auditor General complaining about systemic failures in planning. And I just wonder what progress the Auditor General and our MS had made towards resolution of this matter.
Thank you. Are you happy to take that, Gareth?
Absolutely, and thank you for the question. We've received the correspondence from the member of the Senedd, and arrangements have been made to meet that member of the Senedd and to understand the concerns that that member of the Senedd wishes to raise with the Auditor General. And obviously the Auditor General, once we've received those concerns, will consider whether or not that falls within our remit and within our work programme abilities. So I can't give you any further update at this point, Chair, but obviously that is work that's in progress, and we will provide a further update once that meeting has taken place.
Thank you. Thank you, Gareth. John, is that does that satisfy your question?
I think it does. I think we'll just take a note, and no doubt it'll crop up again in the next meeting.
Thank you. Thanks very much, John, for the question, and thank you, Gareth. So the committee will be looking for an update in due course and to be advised if there's any further work planned, and if there is, I'm sure it will come to one of our meetings. But I think that's probably enough on that topic for just now, until the relevant meetings have taken place and we've had an update. Councillor Pete.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I was just quickly looking at the key facts, which I think on page 38, and I was looking at the key fact around Powys just having 1% of the most deprived 10% of areas in Wales. I was just wondering what indices were used to reach that figure, because I've sometimes heard criticism in the past that the poverty indexes, don't really reflect rural poverty adequately. And I say it's encouraging to see such a low percentage, but it doesn't sort of bear out what I sometimes see in practice. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Thanks. Emma, Gareth?
More than happy to take that, Chair. I understand, but I will confirm with my colleagues that we use the WIMD, so the Welsh Index of Multiple Deprivation, as that is the central source that Welsh Government also uses for many of the basis of its funding allocations. But I will go back and confirm, and will provide an update through the Chair and the clerking team to the committee.
Thank you, Gareth.
Thank you. Thanks, Gareth. Thanks, Pete. Councillor Chris.
Thank you. Just building on the point of fact that Councillor Peter just referred to. Lower down in that paragraph, it mentions that we've got an increase of 20% in the numbers of people aged over 65. That means that there is a potentially higher probability that we are going to get more demands on some of our services, particularly on adult services. Are we as a council any different from other local authorities in relation to the increase in the over 65s, and does that put us at a disadvantage, and how can we then utilize those indexes that you mentioned to justify a greater acknowledgement of the demands on Powys County Council compared to some of the others?
Jane, can you come in on that?
Yeah,
Thank you.
we're acutely aware of the rising numbers of those people over 65 that we have within Powys, and we're aware, obviously, that proportionately the percentage of our population is greater in that aspect as well compared to other areas of Wales. So in terms of any work that we do around that, in terms of the models that we use to support those people and so on, all of that is built into our financial planning and our forward service business planning as well, where we model that. We do have comparative data across Wales on how we compare from a numbers perspective, but also how our service costs compare with others across the service perspective as well. So yes, we are aware. It is a concern across the whole of Wales. Everybody is seeing an increase in demand for adult social care. So we're not unique in that. But I think in terms of that proportionality, it is a greater challenge for us in Powys, particularly working in such a rural authority as well, where we have issues in terms of workforce, in terms of distances travelled and so on and so forth. So yes, there is, it's something that we are very aware of and are working through to see how best we can cater for those that need our support.
That's helpful to understand that, Jane. Can I just ask a supplementary question, because it gives then that the population has moved from 132,700 to 133,900, which is an increase of what, 1,200. Is the 20% increase of the 1,200 or of the overall figure?
That's a question. I need to just have a quick look at it. You've put me on the spot a bit there. I don't know if Audit Wales can pick up on that one, but we can come back to you to be absolutely clear.
Okay.
Councillor Chris, are you happy if we move on and
Yeah,
comes
by all
back
means.
to you?
It was only as I read it, I
Yeah,
picked it up, and I just wanted a clarification to it, because
right. Okay.
obviously it has different interpretations of what that means.
Yes, it does. It would have different implications, wouldn't it? Yeah, thank you. Any other points on the item 4? Could I just note the item in this paper that struck me was the commentary on the use of performance information, a reminder of the April 2024 report that found that performance information provided to senior leaders does not enable them to have a comprehensive understanding of a service user perspective and the relevant outcomes. And it was my thinking there was really in connection with the more recent financial sustainability audit undertaken by Audit Wales, and the importance of sustainable Powys, and our focus on effective budget planning and financial control going forward. It was really just looking to senior officers for assurance that these comments on the use of performance data in decision making and in planning, that's being addressed. Jane, Jane.
Yeah, I think, we've seen that recommendation flowing out from that report. We're obviously aware of any other recommendations along the similar theme that we're looking at too, as you mentioned already from the financial sustainability review. It's something we've clearly taken on board in terms of our performance management reporting. We're looking at a new way of reporting under the Corporate and Equality Strategic Plan objectives as we move through this year. So that is being developed now as we speak. So you will see a change in terms of the reporting there. And I think it's fair to say other aspects too. We picked up on integrated business planning. Clearly, performance is a key factor that services need to be looking at, taking on board where improvements can be made, driving improvement as a result of those performance indices. So getting those right so that we are clear on what's driving that and looking to see how we can then improve is all fundamental to the review that we're undertaking now in developing those 5-year budget models and service plans over the next few years. We're also acutely aware that once we've got a really good suite of that data, then there is a role for scrutiny in terms of scrutinising that effectively as well. So we're also taking that on board. So I think, you know, we've picked up some of the recommendations, we're acting upon it, and I'm hoping that you will all be pleased with the improvement that you see as we move through the next few months and through the rest of this financial year in all aspects that we're working on.
Thank you, Jane. Thank you. And I'm sure the committee will look forward to seeing some of the products of that work in the context of its assurance role. Any other comments or questions in connection with item 4, the annual audit summary? If not, I'm going to move us on to item 5, which is the Audit Wales work programme and timetable and the quarterly update to March 2025. And Gareth is going to just briefly introduce that item as well, please.
Thank you, Chair. And as you know, we provide these updates to the committee at the end of each quarter. There's been a slight time lag between the 31st of March and now the 23rd of May today. So just very briefly, Chair, if it's okay, I'll provide you just a little update as to where the position currently is, as well as where the position was on the 31st of March. So in terms of unscheduled care, that will be issued for clearance in June. The clearance process is complete on the scrutiny review. The final report has been issued and we are awaiting the Council's management response form to be completed so that we can bring both the report and the management response form to a future Governance and Audit Committee meeting. The commissioning report has been issued for clearance, and as we've been in the meeting, we've received the clearance response from the Council. So that will move through the management response process as well. On the corporate governance review, I know this is one that the committee is interested in. We're currently finalising the scope of that to issue that to the council. We have got our resources planned in and we have a timetable to enable ourselves to issue a draft report to the council by the end of September. The workforce thematic, we are timetabling that review because we're undertaking that across the 22 councils. We're currently timetabling that review across Wales. And the risk management work, which we've completed, we did the evidence gathering about 4 to 5 weeks ago. We're currently drafting the report on that, so we'll be in a position shortly to issue that report in draft to the council. On our local government national studies, just the latest update on those. We're in the very final stages of clearance on the temporary accommodation study. On the capital study, which I know is of interest to a number of the members on the committee, we did some local interviews in Powys to inform our national report. We will not be producing a Powys specific output on that report, but the evidence from Powys will inform our national picture. We're hoping that that report will be available for clearance by the end of July, and the work on children's services is slightly delayed from where we'd hoped it would be, but we're in the scoping stages of that, which is a significant cost pressure to many local authorities across Wales. And then just checking, that is the update that I wanted to provide to the committee, as well as what's in the pack.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Gareth, for bringing us up to date. Thank you. Any questions from members? Gareth, please. You're on mute, Gareth.
Sorry about that. Yeah, I'd like to thank Audit Wales colleagues for the opportunity to make some input into their national study on the capital programme. And this drew on the work that the working group had done to date on the capital programme in Powys. So I'd like to think in future that this is not a one-off, and where appropriate, it's deemed appropriate, that we could make a constructive contribution to the work of Audit Wales. I think we'd like to take up those opportunities.
Thank you, thank you, Gareth. Certainly, I've been interviewed for a couple of the studies, so it feels like it's very good practice.
Yeah.
So I certainly welcome the opportunity to give feedback and comment where appropriate. So Gareth, I'm assuming that's sort of maintained. That will be maintained as practice where appropriate.
Yes, where appropriate, and where yeah, we will look to ensure that we take account of as wide a range of views as we possibly can. And we're obviously, in our engagement with the committee, we're aware of what the working groups that you have, so that if you were, that is of relevance, that we will look to seek those views, as well as views from other parties who have a role as well in managing those areas.
Absolutely, because you need that 360-degree view, don't you, to do your work effectively. So yeah, thank you, Gareth, and
Thank you.
both of you. Catherine, I can see your hands up.
Oh, hi. Yes, it's just in relation to the question earlier regarding the population projections. So the information comes from Stats Wales. It's published on the website. I think there's a link at the bottom of page 38 if anyone wishes to know more. But it was just to clarify that although the overall population is going to increase by 1%, different groups within that are obviously going up. So overall younger people decreasing, and that 20% increase of the older population is within the overall 1% increase. So it's just to clarify that one.
Thanks very much, Catherine, for jumping in to do that. Much appreciated. I had a question on item 5. It was really just, my focus was really in the corporate governance review, which we've been looking forward to for some time. So really pleased that it's coming together now in the next few months. I guess from a governance and audit committee perspective, whilst we haven't seen any scopes or remits yet, I mean, I would just hope that, I think what we recognise that a lot of work has been done by Audit Wales in reviewing risk and scrutiny and commissioning financial sustainability. So a lot of work's been done over the past year or so in the broad governance space. So one of the things I'm interested in is how the corporate governance reviews will be cognizant of all of that other work as you progress with the corporate governance work in its own right. Or if you can't answer the question, Gareth, just leave it. But that's what's in my mind.
Well, obviously, we take account of all of the audit work that we've done to inform the scopes of future audit work, because otherwise, to ensure that we've got a complete picture of what's happening, I think what I would also recognise is that the council is also making progress, as we heard from the Section 151 officer around performance reporting. There are changes afoot as well during 25-26 to some of those arrangements. So we will keep track of those changes as well through our professional dialogue with the officers, and obviously evaluate those changes as we go along. So we are trying to bring those things together so that we can provide a perspective back to the committee at a point in time. But again, that will only ever be at a point in time based on the evidence that we've gathered. So I just want to be clear about what the scope of our findings will be, and the level of reliance that you will be able to take from that, because it will be around the scope that we have rather than, so I'm just trying to be clear that we will take account of the work, but we will draw on, and we will draw from our evidence base to give you that view at the point in time that we publish that.
Fine. Well, we'll look forward to understanding the detail of the scope and the detailed timetable over the next few weeks then. Thank you very much, Gareth. Thank you. We'll move on to agenda item 6, which is the detailed audit plan. And Emma, I believe you're going to lead on this one. If you just introduce briefly, and then we'll take questions from the floor.
Yep, sure. Thanks, Chair. So I'm bringing this report to you today just to cover off the areas that Audit Wales will be covering within the 25-26 year, but obviously for the financial statements work, that'll cover 24-25, and the performance audit work will be in the current year. What I need to draw your attention to is that materiality for this year's statements is 5.86 million. So that's the level that we look at in terms of whether, if that was incorrect to that level, then we would need to obviously bring that to your attention. And then anything that is over 0.293 million, we will present back to you at Audit Committee once we've undertaken the audit work. There are also two other areas which I should highlight, which are areas we class as material by nature because they're significant to readers of the accounts, and that's the remuneration report element. So for that, it's £1,000, and that will be covered within the staff cost element only, salary in terms of salary, and then also the related party disclosures, where we've set the lower materiality level of 10,000, where there's a related party between the council and individuals. I need to bring to your attention that some of the risk areas that we found, one is a standard risk which you will see in all audit plans, no matter which council you were looking at, which is the risk of management override. And it's something that is prescribed by the ISA that we need to ensure is not happening. So you will have seen within the report what the audit team will do to ensure that we confirm there is no management override. There's also then other areas of focus which aren't as high risk as the significant risk, but nevertheless, they're important that we bring to your attention so you realise that that's where we're going to be focusing some of our audit work. So one of those is the valuation of pension. This year, it might be slightly different for Powys because officers have informed us that potentially the pension may no longer be in a liability. It might actually be in a surplus, which means there'll be a bit more audit work to undertake. But until we get the actual figures, we won't know if that is the actual case. So that's why you'll see a slight variation on the audit work that the team will do in comparison with last year. We then also will look at fixed asset valuation, and we'll be looking at all the findings that we found last year in terms of the revaluation, and we'll be picking up to see how the council has addressed those. And again, you can see the work that we'll do, which is on page 88. As I've mentioned before, senior officer remuneration is important to the reader of the accounts. So we'll also be focusing in on that area and checking that it meets that lower materiality of £1,000. And then one that's new for this year is IFRS 16, which is the leases standard, and that's new into the council. We are aware that the council officers have been doing a lot of work in the background in relation to this, but again, because it's a new area of work, we will be focusing on that when we undertake our audit. And then, as I said before, related parties is obviously another area that we're going to look at given its lower materiality. Page 91 sets out the timetable, which is the standard timetable really in terms of undertaking our work during July and October, and then hoping to bring the accounts back to you in October, which is 1 month earlier than previously, as per the Auditor General communications with the council previously. What I'm going to do now is, because obviously we've got an element of financial audit work which covers off the opinion of the statements, but we also do the performance audit work which is looking at value for money, etc. I'm going to hand over to Gareth, who'll take you through the programme for the 25-26 year.
Thanks, Emma. Gareth.
Thank you. So we have 3 pieces of work that we have proposed. The first of which is the thematic audit on workforce pressures,
Great.
Thank you very much, Gareth. Thank you, Emma.
Sorry, thanks, Gareth. Just to highlight before I move on, if that's okay, Chair, that our estimated audit fee for this year is £428,050. Those are probably the main areas that we needed to highlight to yourselves. Obviously, I'm assuming the rest of the report has been read, and we're willing to take any questions that people may have.
Thank you very much, both. Thank you. Questions from members. Councillor Pete.
Yeah, thanks, Chair, and yeah, thanks, Emma, and thanks, Gareth. I just had 2 questions, if I may, Chair. The first one relates back to the materiality limit that Emma was talking about, and I know it needs to be set somewhere, and it's set at 1% of gross expenditure, but I didn't know if there was any scope for that limit to be amended. Part of what's behind my thinking is I think a rough calculation is every £1 million is a 1% increase in council tax for our residents. So an almost 6 million materiality limit could almost equate to a 6% rise in council tax, which needs flagging up sooner rather than later, I would suggest. So I guess I didn't know if there's any, as I say, scope to negotiate, amend that limit, or whether that's just a bog standard 1% expenditure calculation. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Pete. Emma, can you comment on the fee?
Yeah, sure. Thanks.
Methodology.
Thanks, Councillor Pete. Yeah, as you rightly say, the materiality has been set at 1%. So materiality is our professional judgment, if you like, as auditors, as to what the statements would need to be incorrect by for it to make a change to how the readers would perceive the council. So what we do is we undertake risk assessments, processes, all those types of things that make up the council, if you like. And when we do that, if there's anything sort of out of the ordinary, that's when we would change our standard percentage. So we can have a percentage from 0.5% to 2%, but given that Powys hasn't got anything out of the ordinary in terms of its financial statement processes, that's why we've gone with the 1%, which is the standard percentage that's used through the Audit Wales methodology.
Okay, so sorry if I may, Chair. I guess there, Emma, as well. I think the phrase you used was looking at readers of the accounts. I guess I was just coming at the other angle from a council taxpayer's perspective, is say whether that needed to be lower to flag up these issues earlier.
I think because potentially we can look into that, but I think because we're looking from what an audit perspective is, and because nothing in Powys is sort of flagging them as an outlier compared with other local authorities, then our standard would be to use the 1%. So given what we found during our planning work, we wouldn't see them as needing a different percentage because they're not outliers in terms of how they prepare the accounts.
Okay, thank you. Could I ask my second question, Chair?
Yes, and then I'll go to Councillor Chris.
Thank you very much. The other, I'm not sure if it's Emma or Gareth actually, was looking at the fixed assets revaluations there. And sorry, just excuse me, I'll flip back to a page. I was looking down the 4th planned response bullets, and it says that you will test that the council has adhered to its revaluation policy. I just wondered if included in that test is whether you pass any opinion on the effectiveness, adequacy, correctness, if you like, of that policy. And it may be a comment that could be extrapolated to all policies, Because I guess if the policy is flawed, but we adhere to it, that's one thing. But if we're adhering to a flawed policy, is another thing.
Yep, sure, I can take that. Thanks, Councillor Pete, again. Just so that you're aware, what we do as a standard as part of the audit is have a look at the CIPFA code, which is the code that you would follow to produce the council's accounts. And you'll be pleased to know within the CIPFA code, it's that they have to be revalued within a 5-year period. And the council last year decided to change its policy to at least every 3 years on a rolling programme. So we know that policy does adhere to the CIPFA code. So that is something we check as standard.
Lovely. Okay, thank you very much, Emma. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Thanks, Pete, for the question. Councillor Chris.
Yes, thank you, Chair. And apologies, my camera is off. I've got intermittent internet signal. That's why it's off. I welcome this report and welcome the localised work focusing around cybersecurity, economic development, particularly the cybersecurity, bearing in mind the national picture where we've had some significant events recently. And I note that you've got some terms of reference on there, and I think it's been raised. It could have been in this committee, forgive me if it already has, but is there scope to readjust? And I think, Gareth, you did mention within some of your preamble that there is some local determination of how those terms of reference or scopes come about, and I just wanted to seek assurance around that. The other thing then is looking at how do we benchmark ourselves in relation to then costs that organisations spend around cybersecurity, because the cost of losing access to your systems, particularly in the local authority arena, is huge in managing risk. So I just like a viewpoint around that. And then in relation to your fees, I think it was really helpful to have the breakdowns of those on there. And there is £50,000 being spent on the grants of certification for work. And I just wanted a bit more of an explanation around that. And then in relation to the 50,000, is there a ratio that is used to do that? Because I would anticipate that our external grants coming in are significantly above the £50,000 mark. So it would be good value for money, but I'm just trying to clarify that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Chris. Emma, Gareth. Emma, do you want to take the fee question?
Yeah, that's fine, Chair. Thank you.
And then
Thanks,
go back to you, Gareth, for the other. Yeah.
Thanks, Councillor Chris, for that really good question. In terms of the grant fees, just to give you a perspective of what we actually do, it's all the grants that come in from Welsh Government where they request us to do a certification on them. So that would be teachers' pension, social care workforce, non-domestic rates, and in Powys you've got a few more than others, but you've got 5 pooled budgets. Then on top of that, we'd also be looking at auditing as well your housing benefit claim. So there's quite a few grants in Powys that we do. The way we make up the figure, well, that sounds bad to say make up the figure, but the indicative figure, if you like, is based on what skill mix we feel that we will need to undertake the audit. So obviously, I think the actual band, that's why there's a banding, because the other thing we do is whatever we spend on grants, you get billed afterwards. So we just try and give you a feel for what we think it is. And I think last year's banding was larger than this, but we recognised during last year's audit, as in for the 22-23 grants, that we didn't actually spend as much time as we thought we would based on the instructions that come from Welsh Government. So that's why your figure is slightly, or the banding would be slightly lower than if you were looking at the plan as per last year. So that's the way it works. Unfortunately, I don't have the figure of the totality of those grants in terms of what you receive in, but I do know, you know, even housing benefit in itself is in the millions. So it's tens of millions as a guesstimate of how much we would be certifying for that 45 to 50,000 pounds worth of audit work.
Yeah.
Hopefully that helps.
It does. Thank you for the clarification.
Thank you, Emma. Thanks, Chris. Gareth, could you pick up Chris's first question, please?
Certainly, on the cybersecurity review, we've been running several of these in other authorities at the moment, and we have a standardized set of questions and our audit criteria which define what good looks like. And part of that does include some element of the cost relating to cybersecurity. But I'm sure that as officers who are on the call will recognise that is something which is embedded across all of the organisation, and being able to extrapolate out absolutely the absolute last penny's worth of spend on cybersecurity arrangements may be quite challenging for us to do across all of the authorities. So I will take on board what you've asked us there, Councillor Chris, in terms of when we develop those questions, but it may be quite challenging to actually extrapolate totally that spend, particularly when you take account of training, which is an important element of cybersecurity for both members and officers, and to be able to actually quantify the cost of that time will be quite maybe disproportionate to the amount of time that we will spend on the audit. So we will take account of that as we plan our audit, but I can't necessarily guarantee that we will come up with a benchmarking figure in the final report at this point.
Okay.
Thank you. Jane wants to come in this, then I'll take a final question on this agenda item from John, and then we'll need to move on. Jane.
Yeah, I just wanted to flag up really, because a cost comparison is a difficult one to do, because each authority and the arrangements that they have in place will dependent on the level of risk they believe they have, which is based on their systems and, as Gareth said, the training of staff and so on and so forth. So even if you were high cost or low cost, it wouldn't necessarily give you the assurance about the arrangements that were in place. So it would be a difficult one to be a comparator. I think it's much wider than just what you're costing. I just wanted to really just highlight that. Sorry.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks. John, final question on this agenda item.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I've got a question because I'm slightly confused about the section here on page 87 about the valuation of pension net liability or surplus. You speak in the penultimate paragraph that there was a significant liability on significant impact on the liabilities as at March 24. For example, in some authorities, the liability in fact a surplus. There's also several legal cases, you say, potentially impacting the valuation of the net liability. There is a risk that the liability or surplus is materially misstated. Are we referring to the March 24 or or are we talking about March 25, the study you're about to do?
Thanks, John, for the question. Yeah, we could have probably worded that a bit better. I think we were trying to provide context of what happened in March 24, and because that happened at March 24, which meant there was a large increase. We're thinking that might happen this year, and the net liabilities, obviously, for this year. We don't think it is materially misstated. That's the risk that we've got for 24-25 accounts. So we're just bringing that to your attention. Your accounts were perfectly sound in 23-24, but because those things happened in 23-24, we're just highlighting why we need to look at them in more detail. And as I sort of alluded to when I presented, there's a lot more accounting sort of technical things that you have to do if there's a surplus. So we're bringing that to your attention because officers have said that potentially for March 25, there will be a surplus in Powys. So that's why we're bringing it to your attention.
Will your work in any way be informed by the actuary's valuation, which is going on in parallel to this work?
Yeah, we normally use the work of the actuary. We use them as a auditors, or should I say, we see them as a management expert in accounting speak. And then what we do is we ask someone else to have a look at their work as an auditor's expert, and then that's where we take assurance in terms of the figures. And we do a lot of work around that in terms of what was plugged in and all the assumptions that are made for the pension fund.
Well, it's going to be interesting to see the results when you come out with them at the end of the year. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks very much. Thanks everyone for your questions and for Gareth and Emma's responses. I'll move us on to the pension fund detailed audit plan. Emma, agenda item 7.
Thanks, Chair. This report will look really familiar. The format is exactly the same format as the council plan, apart from obviously we don't do any performance work associated with this or grants work associated with this. It literally is just giving an audit opinion in terms of the statements being true and fair. So you'll see on page 135, materiality for the pension fund is 8.345 million. That's the level where if you've got any mistakes above that, then obviously you'll have a qualified opinion. Then in terms of the reporting threshold, which is anything above that, we will bring to you at audit committee, that's 0.417 million. And just like the council accounts, if there's any related party transactions which are £10,000 incorrect, which relate to individuals, we will also bring that to your attention, given we feel that that is material by nature. As mentioned before, you'll also be aware that that significant risk that I talk of within the council plan, which is due to management override, is also a risk within the pension fund plan, which again is something that is set in stone, if you like, by the ISA. So it's important that we look at it. And then there's one area of focus for the pension fund, and that's in relation to the investment balances. And as you will see, there's a list of the things that we do as an audit team to ensure that those investment asset balances are correct. And then if I move down to page 140, you'll see that the estimated audit fee for this year is £49,752. Again, welcome any questions that anyone has.
Thank you very much, Emma. Thank you. Colleagues, any questions for Emma on the pension fund audit plan? I'm not seeing any hands. In which case, I will, on the basis of the 4 papers and the discussion that we've had, is the committee content to note each of the 4 papers, the summary, the quarterly update, and each of the audit plans? Are you content to note? No. Thank you, John. Someone second that? Right, thank you very much. Thank you. So we're content to know all 4 of those papers. So thank you very much to Gareth and to Emma for guiding us through those papers, and thanks to colleagues for their questions. I'll move us on to our internal audit section of the agenda, and that's led by Ian Halstead, who's our internal audit director. And Ian, the reason I'm doing this is because we've got some new members, and our internal audit work is provided by the South West Audit Partnership, and Ian is the head of internal audit, and he'll guide us through the next 3 agenda items. So we'll move on to agenda item 8, which is a really important internal audit of the Sustainable Powys programme arrangements. And I'd like to thank Ian for conducting this audit, and also to thank Emma and her senior team for for the work on and support of this audit, 'cause it's a really important piece of business, and Governance and Audit Committee have been quite focused on this. So thanks to everyone involved for bringing this report to us. So Ian, if you could briefly introduce, and then we'll open to questions. And if Emma or Jane want to come in, just let me know.
Thank you, Chair.
Ian.
Thank you, Chair. The report is on page 163 of your agenda pack. Just to start, I'll give you a little bit of background. Obviously, as the Chair has mentioned, this piece of work was requested by the Governance and Audit Committee following some reservations that were expressed at meetings. In terms of the scoping of the piece of work, it focuses on the arrangements, so that's the controls and processes in place on the whole delivery approach. To make a note on the limitations of scope, that just to be clear, this piece of work is around the frameworks itself. This piece of work isn't around the actual delivery and performance of sustainable Powys in itself. So it's around the control environment that it sits in. To give you a bit of information, obviously, Sustainable Powys is the Council's response to create a sustainable and resilient set of services that deliver a stronger, greener and fairer future to the citizens of Powys. And my piece of work breaks it down into 6 key areas. So I'll just briefly run through the 6 areas. The first area is on the strategic alignment. The Council demonstrates strong strategic alignment between Sustainable Powys and its core values and principles that are contained in the corporate and strategic equality plan. Sustainable Powys, it's not a policy or a program, which I think has caused some misconception at times. Rather, it's an initial concept that's been developed and nurtured into a delivery approach. So that's developed over time. And this sits within existing governance and management framework. So it doesn't have its own framework. It sits in existing frameworks. I think it's fair to say that there was initial frustration by the audit committee initially, especially around early progress and the pace of that delivery. And I think this was driven mainly by a lack of detailed information and early articulation of the status and timescales of what Sustainable Powys was. And I think that was particularly in the arenas, not so much in management of the council and probably cabinet and those members, but particularly those scrutiny committees that perhaps could have dealt with a bit more foresight and communication around the status and what Sustainable Powys was all about. The second area I'll dip into is around the plan development and approach. The council have considered the impact of failing to fundamentally change the way that it delivers its services. So Sustainable Powys is about transformation and that the approach recognises the importance of partnerships and adaptability and long-term vision. I think there's been a natural development since its original concept was first communicated. I think this concept and this comprehensive approach underscores the council's commitment to transformation and sustainability as core and central pillars of its progress. So it recognises that. However, I think probably the main finding that comes out of this is around the way that the integrated business plans, which are the crucial connection between the approach that we have and the delivery, is inconsistent in its application. So there are some good examples of integrated business planning, and integrated business planning is where it identifies actions, risks, performance information. So there's some really good examples of that, but there does need to be an improvement in some areas around the clarity and delivery and timescales of other integrated business plans. So they need to be more consistent in their approach and more timely. The third section I've looked at was around engagement and involvement, and it's fair to say that the council has carried out extensive engagement, and they've done that through multiple channels across lots of different demographics, regions and partners. So I think it's fair to say that they've provided solid foundations in terms of engagement that leads the council to informed decisions and impactful plans. So the start is there. The start is certainly there. And that engagement will continue. I've seen plans that it is continuing now, in fact, and will continue into the future. Fourth area on governance and leadership. The council are using existing and established governance frameworks, as I mentioned, but they do have a clear direction and accountability in place in its decision making. I think what is important that those things that fit within the programs and projects that we already have, I think they've got governance frameworks in place. It's things that fall slightly outside that we need to make sure that there is proper governance in place. But certainly from a management team, a CLT, an SLT perspective, there is a lot of oversight and a lot of resource put into place to making sure that these are successful and there is suitable challenge at the very highest levels of management within Powys County Council. The fifth area is around reporting, and that includes risk and performance management. And the council have adopted and applied a corporate risk management strategy, the corporate one. And I think that allows anticipation and mitigation of potential issues. I've seen evidence of that. So that risk management strategy is in place and operating. Existing corporate reporting mechanisms will continue to monitor performance against the goals. This means that whilst the council are not going to report specifically on sustainable Powys, there are still individual streams that will report on the strands of sustainable Powys to measure the success. And I think that's because this sustainable Powys is a delivery approach and not a program. And finally, it's around financial resilience. And I think there's a really strong connection between the strategic alignment in the medium-term financial plan and the sustainable Powys delivery approach. So there's a really strong alignment there. There's an emphasis on delivery outcomes and lowering the costs by adopting a county-wide perspective. And overall, the council has established a robust controls around financial management in terms of sustainable Powys. So in conclusion, I've given the audit a high reasonable opinion, which means there are sound systems of control in place. Two main areas of improvement, and that's around the communication approach to make sure that all parties have a realistic understanding and expectation on the development of sustainable Powys and the concept, how it turned from concept through to delivery. And then secondly, around the consistency, quality and timeliness of each service's integrated business plans. Chair, I'll answer any questions, Chair, if there are any. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ian, and thank you for the work. I'm going to go to Gareth Hall first and then Councillor Pete.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you, Ian, for that, for the report and your overview there. I'd just like to pick you up on the last point you made, and I think it's something which is very fundamental to your report, which is this importance of integrated business planning going forward. And the point you make, very important point you make, is that's the link between the strategic impacts that the council is looking to achieve and the detail, the day-to-day detail of individual service delivery areas. And you say there's examples of good practice, and we've seen those in the past, and they've highlighted. But it is integrated business planning is something of a curate's egg. Matters are going to be exacerbated because they're now going to not just look at a 1-year time horizon, but a 5-year time horizon, and moving from 5 years to 15 to 20 years to align with the recommendations of Audit Wales when it comes to forward planning on capital programs. So this is going to be quite a challenge for individual services who in the past have focused on the budgets, but there hasn't been real clarity in what those budgets deliver in terms of outputs, and of course the summation of those outputs, so the impacts which will make the difference in the future. And it's something that you, Chair, said on an earlier agenda point, is how we as a committee can get regular assurances that this process is on track, and hopefully we can make some inputs into it. Because if we're going to get this right, it's not just about the performance, the performance in the individual business plans of service areas, but also Sustainable Powys will be looking for cross-service area delivery and that full integration there. So consistency amongst performance measures, how they're measurable, and how regularly they're measured and reported is important. And of course, there's another dimension on that, because I think we all accept that success or otherwise of Sustainable Powys is not just about the council and its different services areas getting their act together, but working with partners as well. And they need to be aligned in this service delivery. So I think this is a very timely report. It highlights the very important areas, but if we could get those sorts of assurances going forward, I think that would help matters. And it's about the process, and of course we don't get involved in the content of it.
Thank you very much, Gareth. What I'm planning to do, just to manage people's expectations, Jane, I'm going to bring in Councillor Pete and then Councillor Graham, who've got their hands up, and then I'll go to you, and you can pick up any comments that Councillor Graham and Councillor Pete have as well when you address Gareth's observations. Councillor Pete, and then I'll go to Councillor Graham.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and yeah, thank you, Ian, for the presentation. I was just looking around the background on pages 163 and 164 of the pack, which talk about assessing the level of community engagement and reviewing the effectiveness. And indeed, under scope for community engagement, it says you will review the extent and effectiveness of community involvement. But when I then look at section, I think it's 3.3, that just seems to focus for me on how we've tried to engage, and it's not telling me how effective that engagement was. So for me, the effective engagement is really crucial to this exercise, especially when you sort of think of the things that we're asking communities to do, or going to be asking communities if they can do. The effectiveness measures should be beyond just measuring numbers of participants, especially as sometimes decisions are made or conclusions reached by extrapolating from a very small number of participants. So I was just wondering if you could please just expand a bit more on how you will assess the effectiveness of community involvement, especially against those key aspects in the scope and the background. And then I'm also interested as to why, when this is deemed to be so crucial, it's not at least one of the top 3 risks that are mentioned in section 5.1 of the report. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Pete. Ian, what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring Councillor Breeze in, and then Councillor Adam, and then I'm going to ask Jane to come in, and then I'll go back to you, and then we'll close down this agenda item. So gather up answers to all of the questions as we go along. Councillor Graham and then Councillor Adam, and Councillor Adam will be the last question on this item.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'm going to be extremely brief because Councillor Peter has made the same questions that I had lined up, actually. And just for a little background information on that, I've attended personally 2 public engagement meetings with community councils over the last couple of months. And the feedback there was certainly that community councils hadn't grasped this yet and didn't quite understand it. So I'm also really keen to know how we're going to measure what they feel, what they know, and how they're going to respond. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Graham, and thanks for bringing that sort of direct feedback from the communities into this meeting. It's very much appreciated. Councillor Adam.
Thank you. And I'm also going to be relatively brief because I think I'm also going to swing in behind the points made by councillors Lewington and Breeze, and reflect that it's difficult for me, I don't know, as a newcomer, and I'm reading the papers, to connect the findings you make around that engagement. I'm on the same topic of engagement with our town community councils and with our residents, those very people who we are saying we wish to co-produce and share services with under sustainable Powys. I'm struggling to see the connection between what's written and the sort of the confidence you have in that and the details. And that's partly because, like Councillor Pete Lewington, I can't see that in the paper, and a bit like Councillor Graham Breeze, I can't, in my experience of attending the meetings, I wouldn't say we're yet at the point where we could say we had competent and confident relationships with towns and community councils that were allowed us to co-produce and share service provision. And I wanted to ask, because in producing, at a strategic level, in producing sustainable Powys, we agreed 2 sets of principles. One of those was around co-production and engagement, and there's some, I think it's about 8 or 9 principles in there. And I would like to have seen in this a much clearer analysis of how we have or have not met those principles, rather than a top level, this looks and feels all right, and we've done 29 of these and 8 of those. So that was my area where I do feel we are at real risk of not being able to achieve our ambitions for sustainable Powys if we don't invest in our engagement processes. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Adam. Councillor Chris, I did say that Councillor Adam would have the last question on this, so if you can be very brief, please.
I will, Chair.
Thank
I
you.
was apologies. Community resilience, I think, is some of the issue that we need to address. And I want to know what that looks like and how will we know when we've got there. I understand this is a journey, and I think Ian's commentary has been really helpful. But we need to develop that partnership. So how are we going to get community resilience in action? And it needs to be speeded up.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you. I'm going to go to Jane now to respond on behalf of the exec, and then I'll go to Ian to respond on some of the points of detail in connection with his report. Jane.
Thank you, Chair. And I think there was an awful lot covered in by those speakers. So apologies if I don't cover everything, but I think there's some points that are really important for me to pick up on. I think it's important to note, and I think, Councillor Adams, some of your questions, which Ian will pick up, it's about the scope of this particular piece of work. It didn't necessarily, it was not the remit to cover everything that you've spoken about here. Whilst all of that is important, I think you will see some aspects being shared in a different way. I think in terms of the IBPs, we're noting obviously that some of the improvement is needed there. They're not consistent, they're not robust enough. We don't think all of them are necessarily fully considering impact, both now, but also what that looks like in the future. So we know there's some work to be done there. I think in terms of some of the measures and the performance data that enable us to do that, we're working on that and developing that too, so that we have a much better suite of performance indicators that will sit alongside our corporate and equality strategic plan. And clearly those will be reported routinely through the council. So you will all see those elements as we work through. And of course, the role of scrutiny, as I think I've mentioned already in that. I think Ian's piece of work has really looked at the foundations that we have in place and the arrangements that we have in place. And as you've rightly pointed out, Sustainable Powys has developed over a period of time. And I think over that period, we've looked very much at making sure the organisation understands what we're trying to do. It's about bringing people with us because, of course, the whole organisation has to respond to this, and we need officers at all levels to engage and work with us around that. And we have been working very closely with senior managers and heads of service to try and ensure that everybody is on that page. And we already recognise and have started to share good practice in some services with others that we hope can then encourage them to think slightly differently and to bring everybody on that journey. And it's not going to all happen in 1 year, as we all know. You know, this is something that is going to progress now over a period of time. I think in terms of the timelines that were raised, 5 to 10 years and how difficult it will be for services to plan over that time scale. But doing that is fundamental to the success of this programme. And again, we're working very closely with our managers to help them work through that. The directors are clearly helping lead through the work that we've asked from services around their 5-year plans. But we have to be in a better place. My hope is that through spending review and through the information that Welsh Government get, we'll have a little bit longer term understanding of what our funding might look like, because absolutely that's fundamental to really understanding the budget that we will have available over the next few years. But even without that, we have to work and do some flexibility and some sensitivity analysis to understand, okay, if we don't know, we can't just say, well, we can't do anything. That's not the case, is it? We have to work and model different scenarios to really understand what that looks like. Impact and outcomes on our residents is absolutely fundamental, and we have to better understand that, and we recognise that there's work to do there. What you will see is a whole host of projects coming through that governance structure that Ian has reviewed as part of this work. You will have seen some already. You know, we've been transforming our school estate and the way we organise our schools for many, many years. That is part of Sustainable Powys. We've seen a few decisions already made through some of the social services work, and we know there is a really huge piece of work being done currently on social services that, again, you will see sight of as that works its way through the decision process. Digital transformation has been happening for many years. We've made some inroads, but acknowledge we've got far more to do. And again, we're working with services to try and push that and promote that as much as we can. So you will see a whole series of individual projects that will have their individual project governance arrangements all aligned to the key elements that you saw in that overall picture. There will be risk registers, there'll be routine monitoring, there will be decision points that will need decision. All of that will be in place, and all of that will be routinely included within our budget plans, within our impact assessments, and within all of those IBPs and so on that you see coming through. So this will start to really expand as we get these things coming through. And absolutely, integration across our services is key. We cannot work in isolation. Heads of service are going to be reviewing each other's plans collectively so that we can understand that impact across individual service areas. So all of that will be in place. We're already working with our partners. We have a joint leadership team with Powys Teaching Health colleagues, so we're having those ongoing discussions. Powys Teaching Health Board colleagues have been with us at the engagement sessions we've had with town and community councils. We're already sharing buildings with the police and other bodies. We see that as a key part, obviously, in terms of that partnership working, as well as service delivery and what we can do to support each other. So you will see much more of that. From an engagement perspective, the initial engagement that we did, I think both with councillors, with the wider public, set some foundations. I think after the town and community council meetings that we've just had, which were our second tranche, I've already met with Councillor Cox and with the leader to just consider the effectiveness of what we're currently doing. We don't believe they're being effective either. You know, I think some of you have made those comments. We're reflecting on that. We are now changing the way that we're going to do that so that it can be more effective and we can get that buy-in from our communities to work with us, which clearly we don't have at this point in time. So we know that there is some work to be done there, and that work is continuing. So there's a lot in that. We're not where we need to be yet. But I think, and for all councillors and for the scrutiny committees, you will start to see much more come through. But of course, it has to go through that governance process. It has to go through the decision-making process. Cabinet will have sight of it first, scrutiny and the wider council, and so on and so forth. So you will be seeing a lot, but noting all of the points and comments made, I hope you'll be pleased with what you're seeing coming through.
Thank you very much, Jane. Ian, can you address some of the specific comments on the report, please?
I can certainly, Chair. Just to go back to Gareth Hall's comments around integrated business planning, I think it's really important to recognise that the challenge around sustainable Powys is not only one of process, it's one of culture. And cultural change takes time to do, and so that's a really important aspect that I probably didn't touch on in the report. In terms of the engagement and the questions around engagement and why we've scored it as we have, what we looked at was the process of engagement, as we've done throughout this report. So it's a whole process that we've gone through in the engagement. So it's the layers that the council went through, the opportunities, the communications, and I think, you know, the fact we looked at, you know, the listening, the active listening, the clear communication. So I think those were the markers upon which we determined that the process of engagement was successful. As Jane has mentioned, maybe some of the outcomes, maybe there's still some areas of improvement, but we looked at the process and we felt as a process, it was robust and reasonable.
Okay. Thanks, Ian. Thank you. I'm hesitating because I think we, for purposes of this particular meeting today, we should move on. However, I think what I would like to do, as well as thanking Ian and his team and the corporate leadership team for this report, is to recognise that this conversation is far from over. You know, the sustainable Powys conversation, not least the integration and alignment and the community engagement and community resilience themes, will be really high profile and critical conversations for this committee and for Cabinet and for the scrutiny committees and for CLT going forward. This committee's particular interest is in the risk profile of the authority, and our role is to examine that risk profile and the control frameworks around it, and to seek assurance that everything is being done to put the council in the best possible position to deliver for citizens and manage its strategic and operational risks. Therefore, I really welcome this report, and I would like this committee to have an ongoing role in seeking assurance and examining the ongoing risk profile in connection with the programmes and projects underpinning the ambition of Sustainable Powys. Therefore, I would seek assurance from the senior leaders here today that this committee will be engaged and will have those assurances going forward. But someone, I think it was Gareth Hall, rightly said in his remarks, it's not for this committee to look at the detail of the policy proposals. That's for Cabinet and the scrutiny committees, but this committee has a firm role in examining and seeking assurance how risks are being managed, and that's the lens through which we will continue to examine progress on Sustainable Powys. So Peter, I do want to move on. Have you got a specific question? Because I really don't want to open up this item again in any significant way.
No, I understand, Chair, but sorry, I didn't get a response when you were talking about risk there. I didn't get a response to my question about why this wasn't one of the top 3 risks, this engagement with the community, especially when risk number 3 there is about engagement with members.
Yeah, that no fair play, Pete. You're quite right. Jane, that's probably more for officers than for Ian to come in, or both of you.
I think so, and I think I'll have to go back and double check. I know we've got, in terms of the financial challenge, that's clearly on the risk register, which is a big part of this. We've got other risks on the risk register around climate and so on and so forth, and there will be specific service risks. I think you're right, we don't have that down as a specific risk around engagement and how that impacts on the success or not of sustainable Powys. So I think that's something that we will have to consider as to whether we feel that's appropriate in terms of its scoring and its position on the risk register, and whether we've captured it sufficiently enough in what we already have. So I can take that away, Chair.
Thank you. I think that's quite important. Thanks, Pete, for reminding us of that and for coming back in. Because I suppose what I'm thinking, Jane, really, what I think what we need is assurance that, that it's the circular nature of engagement, and because it's not about communication in terms of telling people stuff. It's about the circular nature of developing the ideas through community engagement and then reiterating over and over again. I think it's that kind of development and assurance we'll be looking for going forward, that 360-degree view of engagement with
and the engagement of the public as part of the decision making.
Absolutely. Yeah. Right. Thank you very much for this, and thanks everyone again for bearing with the committee in seeking further assurance about this topic, and we will be on risk and assurance watch from now on, and thank you very much to everyone who's contributed to this. Ian, I'm going to move us on to items 8 and 9, which are the limited assurance reports on Uskall Robert Owen and Welshpool High School. So can we take item 9 first, and can I also welcome Anwen Orals, who is here to support this item on behalf of Education Department. But Ian, if you could lead us off on item 9, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to pass over to my colleague, Kevin Price, who should be with us in the meeting, who's briefly going to run you through the report.
Thanks very much, Kevin. You're very welcome. I can see you.
Yeah. The first of the 2 schools we're going to be presenting today is Uskall Robert Owen. This received a limited assurance opinion in October 2024, and the full report can be found on page 179 of the agenda pack. I'll give you a summary of the key findings and then welcome any comments or questions at the end. The report contained 9 agreed actions, 1 priority 1, 1 priority 2, and 7 priority 3s. 6 of the 8 areas we reviewed were deemed to be operating effectively, including IT, which had good controls in place to ensure both pupil and data safety. Procurement. Procedures were generally good. Some issues with purchase orders being raised after the receipt of the goods or services. Income. All income had been treated in accordance with the school scheme for finance. Unofficial funds were complete and audited on a regular basis. With health and safety, all procedures were in place and regularly reviewed, but at the time of the audit, there were known issues with the overall condition of the school building. But since the audit, they are relocated to a brand new school. And workforce, there was no report of any issues. Secondly, we did determine that governance of the school required improvement. At the time of the audit, there were 6 vacant governor posts, which have significant impact on its governance, its management, and its overall effectiveness. But by far, the main area of concern was the school budget. The school received a warning notice issue in July 2019, and that was still in place at the time of the audit. The school were projected to have a deficit of 589,000 by the end of the 24-25 financial year, and this was expected to increase to 1.45 million deficit by the end of 26-27 financial year. These figures obviously based on data that was provided to us by the school finance team at the time of the audit, and I appreciate they would have changed by now. And finally, the school were operating with an unlicensed budget and had no formalised deficit recovery plan in place. That is the brief summary, and I welcome any questions or comments.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Kevin. Anwen, is there anything you would like to add before I open to members for questions, please?
Thank you. Probably just to reassure members as well that regarding the first element that Kevin raised around the governance vacancies, I can reassure members here that most of those vacancies have now been filled, and members are sitting on the governing body. But most importantly, I'd like to recognise that Ysgol Robert Owen have worked very, very well with us throughout the autumn term, have met on numerous occasions with myself and finance colleagues, but also twice with the Director of Education and Section 151 Officer Jane Thomas to discuss their recovery plans and renewal of their warning notice. And even though the cumulative deficit is still there, it's significantly reduced from what it was when the audit took place. So as it currently stands on their position that came in on the 1st of May, their in-year deficit for 24-25 financial year ended on 141,000 deficit and a cumulative deficit therefore of 366,000. But I'm pleased to announce that for future years in year, Ysgol Robert Owen are reporting predicted surplus budgets, which has had a significant impact therefore on the cumulative deficit projected for the future. But they have worked very, very closely with us and remain on warning notice until we have reassurances that the cumulative deficit can be addressed.
Thank you very much, Anwen. Thank you, and thank you for the update on the financial position, because that's actually very helpful to understand that. I'll open to questions from committee members, please. Pete.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I just want, I guess, for my own information, really, if I may. I just wondered how these school reports sort of tie in with the recent Estin reports and Estin inspections, and how the work that's being done on these ties in with the work that's being done by the new Accelerated Improvement Board.
Thank you, Councillor Pete. Anwen, are you happy to take that, or yeah?
Yes, thank you, Councillor Pete, for that question. So firstly, I'm pleased to see or say that finances actually did come out very, very well in the local authority Estin inspection. However, and it wasn't a recommendation, but you will be pleased to know that ensuring strong financial management of our schools remains a very strong focus and features very, very highly within the IBP, because at the end of the day, it's a key part of any schools in securing improved performance and outcomes for the learners. So it is there as an area of improvement within our improvement plan. And there's two elements: looking at the support we provide schools, but the other two elements is ensuring that schools are working towards delivering at least in-year balanced budgets. That's very much the expectation following the amount of work that we did last year on school budgets. But also, as was identified by Estin, they did query around surplus budgets as well. So we are going to be, as part of the IBP and as part of our work, making sure that we have reassurances that the schools in a surplus position are actually considering very, very carefully their use of this of their budget to ensure strong improvement and performances for the learners.
Thank you, Anwen. Thank you, Pete. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Thanks, Anwen.
Thank you very much, Councillor Pete. John?
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to return to one of my favourite themes, if I may, and that is the, I'm looking here at the payments record here on page 1 of our pack, page 190. If I'm reading it correctly, 90% of the payments go through without a purchase order. And that doesn't seem to me like a proper financial control in any way, shape, or form. And it's a common theme when we look at these schools records, I'm afraid, good and bad.
Can I ask one of my finance colleagues to come in there?
I was just about to suggest that, Anne. When, so Jane or Mary?
I'll see if Mary puts her hand up, but absolutely, you know, that statistic is not one we would like to see. You have a far better handle on financial management if you have your commitments on the system and you know exactly where you're going. So I'm not sure. I'm guessing it'll be part of recommendations in terms of responding to the audit, and those will be monitored, I think, by the Education Service as part of their routine monitoring of recommendations raised in audits and so on. I don't know if Mary wants to add anything to that. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Jane. Mary?
Apologies, I was having trouble coming off mute. Just to agree with Jane, really, you know, it is something that we would like to see some improvement on, definitely.
I would like to just continue with the point that it's not just this school. It seems to be virtually every school we look at doesn't have proper discipline around this area, and it's a big failing, and particularly when we've got budgets being overspent all over the place. I think we need to crack down on it.
Thank you, John. John, are you content if we move on in respect of this particular agenda item, Uscall Robert Owen, but please hold on to the broader point, and we will come back to the broader point and how we put something on the forward work plan to seek assurance more in the round. But let's move on from this particular school discussion.
Quite happy.
Yeah, thank you, John. But don't lose the broader point at all. Thanks very much. Any further questions or points to be made on Uscall Robert Owen? No, I think Anwen, thank you again for your update, and all credit to the school for improving the financial position and managing to recruit some governors as well. That's good news, and I hope things manage to stabilise. That's helpful. I'll move us on, Ian and Kevin, to agenda item 10, Welshpool High School Limited Assurance Report. Ian, should I go directly to Kevin?
Yes,
yeah, Kevin.
Thank you, Chair. Yep, the report's completed in March this year, and again can be found on page 195 of the agenda pack. The report contained 9 agreed actions, 1 priority 1 and 8 priority 3s. 7 of the 8 areas we reviewed were deemed to be operating effectively, again, including governors who played an active role in the management of the school, IT, good controls in place to ensure both pupil and data safety. They just needed to undertake some admin on some of the assets. Procurement procedures, again, were generally good, with some purchase orders being raised after receipt of the goods and services. Income again was being treated in accordance with school scheme of finance. Unofficial funds were completed and audited on a regular basis. With health and safety, all procedures were in place and operating effectively, and the workforce reported no issues. And again, like Uscall Robert Owen, the main area of concern for us was the school budget. The school were projected to have a deficit of 157,000 by the end of the last financial year. And then this was expected to rise to 407,000 deficit by the end of 26-27 financial year. And finally, the school were operating with an unlicensed budget and had no formalised deficit recovery plan in place. I welcome any comments or queries.
Thank you very much, Kevin, and I'll go directly to Anwen.
Diolch, Galan. Thank you very much, Chair. So very much like Ysgol Robert Owen, I'd like to give reassurances that Welshpool High School have also worked very, very closely with us and have provided us with a recovery plan. Their submittal on the 1st of May for the local authority did leave them with a deficit of in-year deficit in 24-25 of 17,807. But I am pleased to announce that they do predict in-year balanced or surplus budgets for the future years, resulting in the year 28-29 that the cumulative deficit will have projected to come down to 24,800. So they are working again, like Ysgol Robert Owen, very, very closely with us. And as always, we will be monitoring them and we will be looking for further reassurances that they will maintain what they've said there and there will be a deficit agreement put in place.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Anwen, for those assurances. And I'm going to go directly to Councillor Graham.
Thank you, Chair, for allowing me to come in on this. I'm really concerned about the timing of this presentation to this scrutiny committee. And I'd like to say that I am a local authority governor on this high school, but I understand I do not have to just declare an interest because we do have special dispensation in place. The presentation majors on the school's financial position at the time of the deep dive. But clearly, as Anwen says, at the time of coming to scrutiny, the figures are completely out of date. Now, the reason I'm raising this is because this meeting was postponed 2 weeks ago, but this report was then available to the press. And that means the school has been subject to some serious out-of-date information appearing across a broad range of both printed and online press, which could prove extremely damaging to the school's reputation. The report confirms that the school had a deadline to present the final figures, and it's my understanding that that was done. So my question is, was it right to bring this report to the scrutiny committee before the budget deadline? Should the authors of this report really have waited until final figures were confirmed when the picture is completely different? My understanding, and Anwen has confirmed, is that debt will be wiped off, virtually wiped off in the few years, and this year, indeed, the figures presented are incredible considering where the school has been over the last few years. So how much reputational damage has been caused to the school by presenting out-of-date figures? We may never be able to measure that. So can I ask for assurances that consideration will be given to the publication dates of such reports in the future? Because all that was needed was to wait until the end of the financial year, when the situation, as we've seen now, is completely different. And perhaps we should be applauding the school and the Powys officers that have worked alongside them to wipe out this only red flag that's contained within this paper. So thank you, Chair, and I hope I can have some assurances on that.
Thank you very much, Councillor Graham. You're raising some really interesting and consequential timing issues, and I underscore consequential, i.e. the consequences for the school, as you have rightly pointed out. Jane.
Thank you, Chair. I think audit reviews take place throughout the year. They're ongoing. They don't all happen at the same point in time. They are a snapshot of where our schools are at that point of audit. And by the nature of that work, we have to report the findings at that point in time. So it's never probably a good time for anything to be reported when you're seeing figures like we're seeing now. But that was an accurate reflection of where the school was at that time. And it's pleasing to see that they have addressed some of those issues and have worked with the authority. But we all do have an obligation to scrutinise schools, council, other services in these committees. So we have to publish data and reports when they become available and shortly after the work has been done. I appreciate what you're saying, Councillor Breeze, but we do have to bring the reports forward.
Thank you, Jane, and thank you, Councillor Graham, for raising the matter. Councillor Peat.
Yeah, thanks, Jez. Sorry, apologies for coming back again. I was just thinking about something actually in relation to the reports of both the schools there. I wonder if in terms of the action that's been taken to reduce these deficits, whether there's been any impact on either the quality of education for the pupils or any reduction in the options available for the pupils.
Thank you, Councillor Pete Lewington. And I'll bring Anwen in there, but I can also see that Councillor Pete Roberts, the Cabinet member, wants to come in as well. So I'll let Anwen address Councillor Pete's question, and then I'll come to you, Councillor Pete, the portfolio holder. Anwen.
Thank you. Obviously, I can't give you definite elements there for your question, but I want to reassure you that we do work alongside the governing body and the school's senior leadership team for them to have a look very, very carefully what can realistically be done, and in every element of the schoolwork. So it's not just staffing or class sizes. They do look at every option, and most importantly as well, making sure that they make most effective use of grants, which are very, very important, that are there to support learners as well. So that is an element that we will keep on focusing as you will look at our work in the future.
Thank you, Anwen. Councillor Pete Roberts.
Yeah, it's a suggestion based on Councillor Graham's comments about the gaps between when the audit is undertaken and when it comes to audit committee. You've heard a verbal report from Anwen about the progress has been made on that, and I just wonder whether it would be helpful to the committee and the schools community if in future there's a 1 or 2 page response from the service that brings the committee up to date on actions that have been undertaken, because Alman is giving you that verbal response today, whether that summary coming out at the same time as the report would address some of the quite legitimate concerns that Councillor Breeze raised.
Thank you for that suggestion. Yeah, given that it was in the public domain, if the management action and the update had also been in the public domain, the reputational damage which Councillor Graham refers to may have been mitigated or lessened. Anwen, did you want to address that point?
No,
or
I
add
just,
to it?
no, I just accept it, but also to let everybody know there is a paper going to scrutiny and cabinet very soon as well on this theme of schools' balances and the support that we've undertaken to support all our schools across Powys with their budgets.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And thank you, Councillor Graham, for raising the point you did. And thank you, Councillor Pete, for your suggestion. I am going to suggest that Ian and Jane and I should take that away to consider very seriously the timing and choreography around schools' internal audit reports, particularly when more up-to-date financial information could be forthcoming in a relatively short order, for the very reason of the points that Councillor Graham raises. So let's take that one away and think about the timing. You know, not to in any way undermine public scrutiny and our role in assurance and risk management, but equally we don't want to exacerbate risk in the way that Councillor Graham has suggested that may have been done, partly because of the delay in the meeting and whatnot. We need to take it really seriously. I'm going to close down on the swap items, therefore, and just we had 3 items from swap, and I'm just seeking assurance that the committee is content to note each of those items and the discussion that we have had. Content to note all 3 papers, colleagues?
Yep.
Yep. Thank you. And I think finally from me and with Councillor Graham's words in mind and Anwen's up-to-date briefing, I think we should just put on the record our thanks to the school senior teams, governing bodies and the education team in Powys for working collaboratively to improve the position, particularly the financial resilience and sustainability of the schools. I think we all know that it's very, very hard yards, but the improvement that Anwen has reported is very welcome in both cases. So thank you very much. We have about an hour and 10 minutes of our meeting remaining. We're due to finish at 5 o'clock. I'm going to suggest we have I'm going to say 8 minutes. It is 15:52. I'm going to suggest we have an 8-minute break and we reconvene at 4 o'clock to start on the corporate items part of the agenda. So if we could just have a short break and reconvene at 4 o'clock. Thank you very much, Kath, and thanks very much, and we'll all have returned hopefully from our short break, and we'll move on to the corporate items for today's meeting. Item 11, the update on the Global Centre for Rail Excellence has had to be postponed due to the rescheduling of this meeting. So we'll move on to agenda item 12, the National Fraud Initiative Checklist. And I'm going to go to Gareth Jones from Audit Wales to introduce this item, and then I'll ask Ian Halstead if he wants to add anything as well. So Gareth and then Ian. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair. The committee received the National Fraud Initiative report recently, and following the publication of that report, Audit Wales wrote to each of the participating bodies in the NFI to provide the checklist to allow those bodies to self-appraise the involvement in the NFI prior to and during the NFI exercise. And we asked all participating bodies to complete the checklist and to consider presenting the completed checklist to those charged with governance, i.e. this committee, to support scrutiny of the NFI process. So that's why the checklist has been presented by colleagues today, but I just wanted to give you that context for the committee to understand their role within the consideration of this item, Chair. Thank you very much for that opportunity.
Thank you very much for that strategic introduction, Gareth. It's much appreciated. Ian.
Yes, Chair, just briefly, obviously NFI is a biennial UK-wide counter-fraud exercise, and it uses data and it matches those against data held by other public bodies that may suggest fraud or error. So as Gareth mentioned, we've completed this checklist on behalf of the authority, and we've done that because as SWAP, we are the coordinators of the NFI initiative. So we're not the investigators, but we coordinate the council's approach. We've done that for many years because NFI has been around for many years. We've prepared the checklist on behalf of the council to help evaluate how well we're engaging in the NFI exercise. And I think my overall opinion is that in general, the council are well prepared to make sure that we get the most benefit and value out of the initiative and obviously protect against fraud and error. I think the only significant improvement we would need to make is that in past exercises, some of the outcomes have been recorded offline in the council's own mechanisms and not been uploaded onto the NFI system. So we're going to make sure that this year that all investigations are uploaded to the Secure Fraud website. So that's it, Chair. Any questions?
Thank you very much. Any questions from the committee members? No? In which case, I will thank you both for your introductions, and the committee is invited to note the checklist and note the paper, which I trust you are willing to do? Okay, moving on to agenda item 13, which is our regular quarter 4 fraud and error report, which Mary is going to introduce, and then we will invite questions from committee. Mary.
Thank you, Chair. As you said, this is a regular quarterly report of the fraud and error team's activity. The anti-fraud team continues to deliver a really proactive and responsive fraud prevention and detection service across the council. They've also done some joint working with DWP, and that's ongoing, and there are 4 cases where the outcomes are still pending on that, but some good work being undertaken there. And the team is currently managing 60 open investigations of potential error or fraud, with a further 87 council tax matches under review via the National Fraud Initiative as well. So as the report sets out, there are 6 cases that have resulted in confirmed fraud across different areas, including council tax and business rates, misuse of disabled blue badges, and tenancy-related fraud as well. And those activities have resulted in some recoveries and gains to the authority. In terms of outcomes and impact, you'll see in section 4 of the report that the impact and income and potential income gains from their activity for the financial year. So a potential 453,000 in terms of overpayments and rebills, and a potential income saved or revenue gained by Powys of 1.2, 1.3 million in potential income gains, and then another 108,000 in terms of other gains to the public purse, but not necessarily Powys as well. So the team continues to provide those support services with technical advice and fraud risk mitigation, and also shares internally any fraud alerts that we get from national bodies as well. No serious fraud risk recommendations were raised in quarter 4, and all prior recommendations from Audit Wales or SWAP have been addressed as well. So, and the team are also supporting SWAP's baseline fraud risk assessment for 25-26. So we, as a team, they look at, or they emphasise really, that fraud is not just a financial issue. You know, there's a key area there about public trust as well, and looking at that multifaceted approach to it. So leadership, internal controls, technology, and staff training and public awareness. But obviously you're aware that the staff training in particular has been increased and supported lately with the mandatory fraud awareness training as well. I think there were a couple of areas that we would like committee's views on around prioritisation and some feedback maybe on the current approach to fraud detection and prevention as well. Thank you, Chair. I don't know if anyone's got any.
Thank you very much, Mary. Any questions, please? And particularly with any questions at all, and any comments on the 2 questions that Mary particularly asks around prioritisation and detection. Lots of interest in this. I've got Councillor Pete first, then Councillor Chris, then Councillor Graham, then John.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and thank you, Mary, for the report, and indeed for all the work that you and your team do on this topic. So thank you very much. I had sort of 3 comments, questions, Chair. Shall I do them all together or one at a time?
Yeah, just do them all together, Pete, please, and then Mary will come back to you.
Yeah, that's fine. Thank you, Chair. Looking on page 232, 233 of the pack, which is para 3.1 in the report, there was comments around cases closed and fraud detected in terms of some recommendations, and I just wondered if at some stage this committee could actually see those recommendations to assess the impact on the controls and governance framework. And also in para 5.1, it talks about a serious financial risk, I think. And I just wondered if there was a definition of serious, so as I could just understand that a bit better. Second question related to paragraph 4 and the table in there. And I think Mary touched upon it earlier, but the figures, Mary, they're as at the end of March, and they do use the phrase recoverable and potential. And I just wondered if we knew yet how much of that had actually been achieved. And if it wasn't 100%, you know, why not? Or whether that could be something for a later report to come back to committee. And then finally, just a couple of comments around section 7, the review of 2024. Paragraph 21, 7.1, apologies, talks about fraud continuing to grow, whereas paragraph 7.2 says we are reducing fraud. So that just seemed slightly contradictory to me, and I didn't know which was right. And then also, I think the final paragraph talks around tolerating fraud as something that shouldn't be tolerated in the future. But for me, surely fraud shouldn't be tolerated now. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Peat. Mari, would you like to address Councillor Peat's questions, please?
Yes, of course. So in terms of the recommendations for the cases closed, I'm happy to take that back and work with the senior fraud officer and bring something back to committee.
That's fine.
Okay. In terms of serious, I don't think we've got a specific definition of it, but it's recommendations that would indicate a significant or high impact risk of fraud. So systemic control weaknesses or major gaps in our policies or high value vulnerabilities as well. So something that would need that kind of quite urgent intervention. So we didn't get anything of that seriousness or urgency during Q4, but we can come back with a bit more clarity on that if you'd like as well. In terms of the actual gains in last financial year, I haven't got the details with me at the moment, but the 453,000 has been recorded as incoming that we've billed for that, or rebuild or billed for overpayments. But in terms of the potential income gains, I think I'd have to pick that up with our senior fraud officer again and report back to committee. And yeah, looking at section 7 then and whether or not they're contradictory. I think 7.2 in particular is looking at the significant progress that we've made in identifying and reducing the risk of fraud and actual fraud, improving detection and working through all of that. But I think 7.1 is really just referencing that the potential threat of fraud continues to grow because of the nature of fraud itself being constantly evolving. New ways of committing fraud, I suppose, are always being developed. So it's about trying to keep up with that as well, really. And yeah, ideally, no, we wouldn't tolerate any fraud at all. But I don't think it would be right for us to think that our approach, sort of means that there's no other fraud actually being committed. It's about making sure that we prioritise and focus the resources that we've got in terms of that fraud detection and pick up those things that are urgent and more serious. But yeah, ideally we would be able to eliminate fraud, but I don't think we're there yet, definitely.
Thank you, Mari. I wonder, Mari, on some of Councillor Peat's more detailed points where he's looking for particularly for clarification of the numbers in the paper, if perhaps you could discuss with Yvette when she's back from leave if the next paper could perhaps amplify a bit to address some of Councillor Peate's points.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Councillor Chris.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the report. I think it's really helpful. In relation to your focus, I think you're doing a good job as it is. So continue that good work that's going on. In relation to the paper, the table that you've got under section 4 highlights a significant amount of value that you've been able to recover overall. That looks impressive, but have you then subtracted any of the costs associated in reclaiming that money back? And have we got then what the differential is? Because when I initially looked at that, I thought it was only 108,000 that we are the gains, but I may have misread that table, but it's just trying to be real, because that looks good. But if you then cost 4 million to be able to bring that back in, it then defeats part of the object, although there's a set of principles that are right behind it. And then are you noticing still any increase due to the cost of living in relation to fraud activity? And it's probably more around the council tax area, I would assume, but it is an assumption. And then there was one other question that I had, and I'm trying to find it. You mentioned about how can we get the message out more. I always remember when we used to have physical pay slips, and part of the pay slip is you could actually have a message, and I knew that counter fraud used to put that on, certainly in the NHS, which is where my background is. Since we've gone to electronic pay slips, I don't know how you get that message out. So do you use social media? Do we use WhatsApp internally for that communication with our colleagues? And those may be some areas to explore if not.
Thank you, Councillor Chris. Mary.
Thank you, Councillor Chris. So no, those figures aren't net of costs. So those are the gross potential income from the activity. I can reassure committee that the costs aren't anywhere near 4 million, and they're not. They're not. They are quite significantly outweighed by the potential gains there. So, in terms of the trends because of the cost of living, I think that's something maybe I could go back to the team on and try and put something together in terms of whether we actually saw that increase in attempted fraud, particularly around council tax. And bring something back on those trends to committee in future. And I think in terms of getting message out, we've now got a mandatory fraud awareness training for all staff, and we can track who has and who hasn't completed that. So and the completion rates have been quite high. That is something that's monitored from CLT downwards, so we know that gets looked at and followed up as well if there's any shortfall in the numbers that are completing that training as well.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chris, for your questions. And Mary, on the cost of living trends, again, I would suggest that if Yvette can do a bit of analysis on that a straightforward way to bring that to the committee would be simply as an addendum to the next paper.
Yeah.
I'm just checking, Councillor Graham, I had you on my list. Did you want to come in on this paper?
No, my questions were asked. Thank you.
Right, okay, thank you very much, Councillor Graham. I'm going to go to John next, and then I'll bring Mary in, and then I'll give Jane a word as well.
Thanks, Chair. I'll be very brief. I've mentioned this before many times, I think, to Yvette. This department is clearly self-financing, and I wonder whether increased resource would actually improve the yield coming back to the council. I don't know whether that's been considered and how recently it's been considered. Thanks.
Thank you, John. Mary or Jane?
You're right that the team is self-financing, and yeah, we do consider the level of resourcing, obviously, but it is tricky with capacity within the team as well. So it's trying to get the balance right. But yeah, it's something we can have another look at, I think, as we review all our structures.
Excellent.
Thank you. Thanks, John. Jane, I'm just going to go to Councillor Pete for one final question so that I can give you the kind of round up on this, Jane. Councillor Pete.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. And apologies, I've done my usual and just confused myself slightly. So hopefully Mary can unconfuse me. I was just looking back at that table, Mary, and I just had two questions on it. At the top, it says cases and outcomes were complete, but as you pointed out, the first section is, if you like, new ones, or investigations are only just starting. So I just wanted to clarify that. And then the far column, value, I was just beginning to wonder why that doesn't add up to the values that are then in the table in section 4.
Yes. So yes, the table does include incomplete, so fairly new ones as well. So we'll amend the sentence at the top of the table, and I'll have to take that back to Yvette really, and to get the detail on why it doesn't add up. But this is Q4 though, so it could be that this only relates to the table in section 3, only relates to cases in Q4, whereas the table in section 4 is for the full year.
Yeah.
So I expect that's the reason for it. But I will check that with Yvette.
Yeah, sorry, Mary. Yeah, just come to me. Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks, Chair.
Yeah, thanks, Mary. Yeah, Yvette can give us a detailed walkthrough at the next meeting. And honestly, Mary, no disrespect to you at all. I know you're not covering, you're covering. It's not your day-to-day job at all. Jane.
Very quickly, 2 points to make from myself. With regard to fraud being tolerated or not, just to be absolutely clear, within the council, so for our own staff and employees, we have a 0 tolerance, and we have for a long time. Obviously, when we're looking at fraud from the team, it's broader than inside the council. We're covering fraud across residents and so on and so forth as well. So just wanted to point that out. And just one thing to add to what Mary's already said, but in terms of our staff being able to report, on our opening page of our intranet, we have a report fraud button, and that is available to every member of staff. We routinely put comms out reminding them that they have that ability and urging people to come forward if they identify anything. So it's not on a pay slip, but I think it's equally as visible through those mechanisms. So that's in place. That was all, Chair.
No, thank you very much, Jane. Anything further on agenda item 13, or is the committee content to note the report? Okay, so we'll note the report, and Yvette can address some of the points, the additional points at the next meeting. We'll move on to agenda item 14, which is the annual information governance report, and Helen Dolman is with us today to introduce the report, which is a very important report. Helen.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Chair. Before I start moving through the paper, which is in your pack, I'd like to point out that this is the report for the 23-24 financial year. The report for the 24-25 year will follow at a much greater speed than this one. It's just been held up through last year through a number of reiterations and approval. So apologies for the lateness of the report.
Okay, thank you, Helen. But thank you. Moving on.
Okay, moving through the report. The information I'll move through quickly. The information management assurance and governance plan. At the end of the 23-24 year, 35% of the elements had been completed. This is a 2-year plan, so we were halfway through that plan at that point in time. 12% of the elements had been identified following a revision of timescales to be moved into the 25-27 plan, which obviously we're now working to. So some of the elements completed through that year had been the recruitment of a management of electronic information officer to lead upon and implement the management of electronic information policies and procedures, which is an important part for us now in terms of our use of computer systems, SharePoint, and the way that organisations now use electronic information rather than manual information. So it's bringing us into line with the need to manage that information. In terms then of moving on into cybersecurity and GDPR mandatory training, at the end of that year, staff themselves were showing at a 78% compliance rate, with members showing a 93% compliance rate with their training, cybersecurity and GDPR training. They're not actually the same courses because of the difference in the responsibilities, but the compliance rates were as they are. We'd seen through that year improvements in HTR compliance rates to 93.1%, sorry, to 92%, which was quite a dramatic increase for the service due to primarily many of the staff are manual workers and so don't actually have access to computer systems to undertake the training. So the training has to be delivered in a different way. Again, cleaning services and increases seen in their training compliance rates. The council's target for cybersecurity and GDPR training is 95%. So we've got some work to bring up to that 95% target. Section 7 looks at information security incidents and personal data breaches. There was an increase of incidents and breaches reported to the information compliance team, an increase of about 15%. The reason for an increase isn't known. There is nothing to determine why there's been an increase again of breaches, other than to suggest that staff know what they need to be doing when something has gone wrong. Most of the breaches were identified to be due to human error. And so it's important then that we have processes in place to manage those breaches and incidents to contain breaches as quickly and as swiftly as possible to reduce the impact on both the data subjects and the council. There was a reduction, however, of the number of incidents that required reporting to the Information Commissioner, so as such suggesting that the severity of the breaches had reduced. And the decision to report incidents to the Information Commissioner, breaches to the Information Commissioner, is based on a number of factors. And risk factors, and hence the need to undertake risk assessments on the breaches that occur. We can see from the incidents reported to the Information Commissioner that a couple of the incidents were in relation to cyber events, and one of them was in relation to a cyber event affecting one of our suppliers. And that is an area that we need to maintain a closer watch on, in terms of starting to see the risk from our partners and our suppliers. So it's as such important to undertake due diligence through the procurement processes to ensure the security of our information when we're sharing it, and when we're passing it over to contractors, etc. They're gathering the information on our behalf. Any recommendations that have come in from the Information Commissioner are reported on the regulatory tracker and managed through the regulatory tracker. During that year, there were, as the Information Commissioner had issued 17 recommendations to the Council, 15 had been implemented and 2 were still open, and 2 were open from the previous year, leaving 4 still open. 3 of those 4 are now complete and have been concluded. The 4th one is a larger piece of work that will take some time, but is being managed and is still being reported on the tracker. This takes us then to information requests. So these are the requests that are made to the Council under the Freedom of Information, the Environmental Information Regulations, and the Subject Access Request through data protection legislation. There was an increase of 16% in the number of requests received. So 1,271 requests received within the 12-month period, against 1,093 in the previous year. However, there was a slight reduction in the compliance rates across the 3 and overall. This is largely due to, and we've discussed this matter previously, the staffing situation that was in the team through that year. At March 24, only one of the information compliance officers within the team had been with the Council for more than 12 months. So a recruitment exercise had been undertaken and had concluded, but as you appreciate, it takes time for staff to develop skills and knowledge in what can be quite complex legislation. This is, one of the factors resulting in the reduced compliance rate, as well as a long-term sickness within the team that year as well. Currently the team is up to full complement. Within the year, the team, also the information compliance team, introduced a process of informal resolution when people wish to make complaints about their freedom of information or for formal information requests. That's trying to reduce the work involved in undertaking formal internal reviews of handling of a request, and this seems to have worked quite well. Appendix 3 of the report will provide further breakdown into the numbers of informal reviews, internal reviews, which is a complaint really, and the information commissioners' complaints that may come in over when the public go directly to the Information Commissioner or they aren't happy with the outcome of the internal review. One of the Information Commissioner's complaints was in relation to the exemptions that the council had applied on the disclosure, and the Information Commissioner found in the council's favour, following quite a complicated report back to the Information Commissioner explaining how we'd come to our decision, our understanding of the legislation and of the Information Commissioner's own guidance. This is a published decision notice by the Information Commissioner. The lessons learned from that exercise have been shared with the service area themselves. The Section 9 on information management covers this new area of work within the information compliance team, with the information management services already holding and managing the council's current and semi-current hard copy records, but the management of electronic information officer sits within the information compliance team and will take forward much of the work around the council's need to manage its electronic information, and has made good inroads into some of the policies such as our classification scheme and retention schedule. So in conclusion, the Senior Information Risk Owner Statements of Assurance is a reasonable assurance over the council's information governance framework for 22-23. It was partial assurance was given, and due to the new arrangements and the plans that are in place, this would reflect a reasonable assurance to move forward with our information governance framework and develop that maturity. The team assists the services and we learn as mistakes may happen, and as such that reasonable assurance can be given over the IG framework, but noting that there's always rooms for improvement, and with details of planned activity for the 24-25 year, which will be reported on, as I said, shortly. And thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Helen. I thought this was really interesting and really helpful report. Just before I open it to colleagues, can you remind me how the reasonable assurance assessment? Can you just say a wee bit more about how that's conducted by the CIRO, the Senior Information Owner?
We've worked with a tracker called the Information Commissioner's Accountability Tracker, which covers generally data protection matters, and so it's not an exact science in terms of assessment, but considering where we were the previous year in terms of staffing, in terms of our management of electronic information, and the work we've done on the information request app in terms of our information complaints, etc., then it was felt that we are moving in the right direction, and where we know we've got problems, we understand where, say, we understand our reasons for non-compliance in terms of why we aren't able to respond to requests, etc. We've been working on the backlog of information requests. So if we were questioned by the Commissioner, we understand what is going on and why we're in the position we are.
Right, thank you. So you're measuring yourself against an established framework that everyone's measuring themselves against?
It's not a mandatory assessment. The organisations aren't required to follow the Information Commissioner's accountability tracker, but we're using the evidence found from it to build into that assurance, reasonable assurance.
No, that sounds very sensible, to measure yourself against that tracker. I think what the curiosity that I'm having is, it's kind of a self-assessment then.
Yes.
Yeah. I think that's what I think the committee needs to be cognizant of that the reasonable assurance is a self-assessment which is different from our the earlier discussions that we've had with our internal auditors, where the internal auditors come in as a third party independent assessment, and they make an of a limited assurance or reasonable assurance. That's quite different from a self-assessment. So I just wanted to be clear that it's self-assessment as opposed to a third party assessment. Yeah.
That's correct, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I just wanted to be clear about that. Councillor Pete.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Yeah, and thanks, Helen, for the report and the updates. I was just looking though at section 11 in the report, which talks about the planned activities for 24-25.
Yes.
I just wondered if there was any sort of updates or assurances you could sort of share on that, because as I'm sure you're well aware, we've already passed the 31st of March for 25.
Yeah, yes, that's no problem, Councillor. In terms of, I've just listed 3 in the report for, for sake of ease. The classification scheme has pretty much been concluded. The retention schedule work has been undertaken by the information compliance team and the information management services jointly. And work has commenced on the work for reviewing information asset registers with an agreed plan of work approved by the Corporate Information Governance Group. So we're seeing some real inroads into that area of work. The information compliance team, I spoke earlier of needing to develop skills and knowledge within that team, and the work that we've been doing has sort of borne fruit. I presume somebody would probably ask me this question, so I checked on our compliance rates just for the end of the 24-25 year, and the compliance rate now is up to 80%. So we've seen again some good increases in their ability to handle information requests and move those through more skillfully and more efficiently. The postal checking regime that is referred to has been concluded as well. So those pieces of work have been done, but the new 25-27 plan has been approved as well. So there are some big pieces of work coming forward in the next couple of years as well.
Lovely, good. Yeah, thank you very much, Helen. Yeah, that sounds quite encouraging. Thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Helen. Thanks, Councillor Pete. Councillor Chris.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the report. I think it's helpful, and obviously let's hope the mandatory training figures are still on the up as well, which would be encouraging. My queries then, I looked at the Appendix 2 table, which showed some of the various areas where there'd been incidences, and I start then to potentially want to focus in on some of those areas, particularly around children's services. They were all reported from our staff. They weren't anything to do with any of the clients on there. So they're all staff incidences is my first question, and just having confirmation of that. And in the table under the incidences, there's something that says cyber factor, and I didn't know what that meant in what context. So if you could just clarify what that means. But I think I will hold like my hold fire in relation to proceeding until I see the next report, which will be more up to date, and then we'll be able to do some benchmarking of whether there's any issues that need further scrutiny.
Yes,
thanks, Councillor Chris. Helen.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Walsh. In terms of the incidents being reported, an incident could be, or breach could be reported by a member of staff, a member of one of our partner organisations, by a member of the public. So we could be notified by any individual or even the Information Commissioner themselves that a breach has occurred or is alleged to have occurred. So we're not able to break that down in this report, Councillor Walsh, in terms of where those numbers for children's services came in, but there would have been a range of sources. But in the main, it is staff reporting incidents, and many will report an incident that's just occurred to themselves. In terms of the second question for a cyber factor, cybersecurity is managed through a different area to the information compliance team, but an incident that affects our computer systems is likely to affect the personal data of our customers or even our staff, and as such, it's incumbent on the two areas to work together to understand both the security and the technical side of the incident, but for my staff to understand the personal data and the impact on it. So hence the reporting of cyber factors as well in that.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you for that.
Thank you very much, colleagues, for your questions, and thanks very much, Helen, for your report and for fielding the questions so well as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'm going to ask the committee to note the report, but I think in noting the 23-24 report, we need to also note that we look forward to receiving the 24-25 report within the next few months, and then to get into a more prompt and regular pattern of reporting, so that we're seeing the report within a few months of the end of the relevant year as we go forward. But thank you, Helen. It's a good report, and you must be quite relieved that your team is a bit stronger than it was this time last year.
Yes, thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thanks, Helen. And we're moving on to item 15, the organisational response to the Brownfield Land and Empty Buildings National Report. So Gareth, is there anything you want to say, please, by way of introduction, because it was your report, and then I'll ask Daniel to respond on behalf of the authority.
Yes, thank you, Chair. This was an all Wales report, so we gathered evidence from across Wales, so we didn't do a specific piece of individual evidence gathering in Powys County Council, but we made some recommendations to all local authorities in Wales. It was an all Wales review to look at how Welsh councils are supporting and encouraging the repurposing and regeneration of vacant properties and brownfield sites into homes or for other uses. And as we know, there's the context of sustainability, but also the homelessness crisis across Wales. So what are brownfield sites? In short, it's land which was or is occupied by a permanent structure or associated fixed surface infrastructure. So we asked the question in this review, are local authorities, councils doing all that they can to support and encourage vacant non-domestic properties and vacant brownfield sites being repurposed into homes or other uses? And we concluded that despite notable amounts of brownfield developments being delivered by councils, regeneration could be increased significantly with a more systematic, interventionist and collaborative approach. By drawing on successful approaches elsewhere and more focused planning, councils could be better equipped to overcome significant barriers. And we made 3 recommendations which are set out in the management response form, and that's set out on pages 259 onwards of your pack. Now, our Code of Audit Practice requires us to be satisfied that the Council has properly considered the findings and recommendations. I can confirm that having reviewed the Council's response, our view is that the Council has in part properly considered the findings and recommendations. The response does very clearly set out the intended actions to address the 3 recommendations. However, as currently drafted, the management response form doesn't include the timescales for those actions, which will need to be included in the recommendations tracker. And we've discussed this with officers, and they were aware that we would make that statement. And I know that they've prepared some timescales to give to you as a committee. So as set out in the report, we expect that each council's governance and audit committee will receive the report, which is what you're doing, and monitor the response in a timely way, hence why we've asked for the timescales. And those recommendations, the actions and the timescales will be entered into the regulatory tracker, which is a key part of your monitoring arrangements. I'll now pass over on to the officers to summarise the council's response.
Thank you very much, Daniel.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you for the response there, Gareth. And as you said, we have discussions around a proposed timeline, and that will be published shortly. So it's in line with the LDP. So in terms of the recommendations, the first recommendation was to enable stakeholders to assess potential sites. Council should create a systematic process to find and publicise suitable sites for generation, drawing down existing data as well as external data, and where known, key barriers should be named to help efforts to overcome them. So as part of the LDP review that's currently underway, we are exploring data on potential sites and publishing it as part of the candidate sites register. We are looking at the planning constraints information that is published and how we can look to understand those barriers. We're also seeking pre-planning application advice to help us identify those sites and redevelopment where that is suitable. From the regeneration perspective, it's fair to say that actually there's been, I think, we haven't necessarily always aligned economic development with LDP development. So we're now in the space where we've actually repurposed a small part of the team to actually focus upon sites and premises alignment work, developing a pipeline of sites for the next 5 to 10 years. So this is a conjunction of a private-public sector engagement, and these sites will be shared via the website to attract investment. So we're developing a public portal so people can understand and see what we're proposing in our pipeline. Recommendation 2 was to help ensure that regeneration activity and the shaping environment is informed by the needs of communities. Council should increase opportunities for community-based involvement. This is something we've taken on board as part of our regen work, and we are actually using our regen team as we speak, going out to town councils town councils and also councils as well, for them to propose sites to us as part of that. The public consultation is key to that, and we had the placemaking plans funded. Some of that work is continuing within the budget constraints that we have. So essentially looking to build a strong network between the regeneration team and those who are keen to engage. Crucially, this includes local businesses and developers who can propose work where appropriate. Where possible, funding is set aside to allow companies requiring the appropriate skills through local partners such as Business Wales, Anti-Cymru, and the Regional Skills Partnership. So using the Regen programme, we're able to identify strategic projects using our partners both within Welsh Government, UK Government, and the private sector to identify those buildings and bring them back into use. An example I can share with you there is we're currently looking at some town centre regeneration around Brecon as an example, and we're understanding which buildings could be brought forward for use for those regen purposes. Recommendation 3 was to provide focus and impetus to development of brownfield sites. Council should review their current generation approaches. So I've partly answered that already, but we are looking to adopt an annual monitoring report, and the amount of hectares that is and location of windfall development permitted on previously developed land and greenfield. So we are widening the work we're doing with the planning service to encourage that. You know, our mantra is always brownfield site first. It's how we approach it, and it's key to how we take the LDP forward. And as part of that as well, I've encouraged where appropriate actually that we're using the grant funding available to us, but when we look at brownfields, there are on occasion buildings that are still actually within use that with the right investments could be improved, expanded, attract further investment potentially into our communities. So I would say, just to finish really, that we have taken note of the recommendations that were presented to us from the audit, and we're adopting those and taking the timeline forward.
Thank you very much, Daniel. Thanks. Does anyone have any questions or comments on any questions for Daniel or Gareth, or any comments? Pete, Councillor Pete.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Just a quick question for Daniel, if I may, Daniel. One of the recommendations there, you talked about developing place plans. And how are you going to engage with town councils like Newtown, say, that's already got a place plan firmly in place?
Yeah, that's right. So as you're aware, that with the place plans that we have in place is identifying those projects community wish to bring forward. And we would then work with those with that town council, looking to utilise the funding available under the Welsh Government Regeneration Programme, or potentially other funds that may become available as time develops, and look to support those projects going forward. There isn't necessarily the budget to do the evaluation, but we can certainly work with that town council should they agree sites to bring forward. So that programme is open and is there to be explored.
Yeah, Chair, if I may. Yeah, thanks, Daniel. Yeah, I just wonder how we just join that together then, because the place plan in Newtown has been established for a couple of years now.
Yeah.
With a specific section in there on the LDP. So yeah, I
That's
just wonder
right.
how we get the regen team to
Yeah,
talk to the town council.
I know for a fact the regen team are actually meeting with the Newtown place plan developers in the next week or so, and actually as part of the LDP review, they're looking to understand the boundaries of the town centre definition in Newtown, for example, just to say, are we necessarily capturing the right areas of town? So that is being reviewed as we speak. But I would encourage any town council who wishes to discuss the place plan to get in touch with myself or my colleagues, and we can look at those projects.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks very much, Daniel. Gareth, please. I'll give Gareth the last question on this because we're starting to run out of time. Gareth? You're on mute, Gareth.
Yeah, sorry about that. Yeah, I commend what you're doing, Daniel. But a word of caution is that brownfield sites are a broad church, and they're everything from heavily contaminated sites of nasty past industrial uses to the sorts that you talked about, existing buildings which maybe have got a more profitable or a more beneficial use for the community. And I'm just wondering, out there in the marketplace, to get people involved in this, how do you come across as realistic about the scope for these sites being brought back into beneficial use?
Yeah, it's a very good point, Councillor. You say sites published on the register may not be suitable for redevelopment, because as you say, you start doing the ground surveys, and all of a sudden
exactly
it was used for storing coal for 50 years, and you got problems with various nasties in the soil, as it were. So it is something that we're deeply aware that has to be, whilst it's brownfield, may not necessarily be the appropriate site to use. So I think what we're looking to do is by undertaking the approach of bringing the regen team as part of the process, we can undertake site surveys where appropriate. We have allocated or looking to allocate fundings under this year's shared prosperity funding, for example, to undertake site surveys and just understand what the art of the possible is really with some of these sites that the communities bring forward.
No, that's good to hear. Thanks.
Thank you for your question, Gareth, and thank you, Daniel. Thank you. The committee content to note Daniel's response to the national Daniel's response on behalf of Powys County Council to the national review.
Yep.
Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you. We'll move on, and with my eye on the clock, we are a wee bit close to the wire, so we'll try to discharge the rest of the agenda as quickly as we possibly can. The item 1718, the exempt item, and the social care case management discussion are postponed again because of the fallout of having to postpone this meeting, which was originally scheduled for the 8th. It's a matter of some regret, but we will have a proper discussion with Nina about the social care case management system as soon as we reasonably can, which moves us on. Oh, I forgot 16. Apologies, everyone. 16, item 16, 17 and 18 are postponed, but I missed 16. 16 is there. It's not for a full strategic risk register discussion. What we want to prompt under item 16 is the next round of our risk deep dives and which areas the committee would like to prioritise for our forthcoming schedule of deep dives, because we've exhausted our earlier schedule, and we now need to identify where we want to go now. And so I'm really looking just simply for opinions and assessments of committee members as to prioritisation over the next few months. It's also important.
About this, Lynn, and come back to you.
John, would you rather come back and
I would. I'd like to think.
Right. Okay.
And I'm a bit tired at the moment, to be
Right.
honest.
Okay. It is 5 o'clock, and we have been going for a while. Everyone, all committee members have got the paper, which is a summary of the strategic risks as they currently stand, together with our intention, the paper which it describes our intention for the risk deep dives. So, Kath, is it okay if I invite committee members to email and correspondence, and we'll develop a programme?
Yes, of course, no problem, Chair.
And put it in the forward work plan?
Yeah.
Right, okay, that's what we'll do then, colleagues. Moving on to item 19, therefore, working group updates. And on item 19, I'd like to go to Gareth Hall first. Colleagues may remember that we agreed already to reconstitute our capital working group, and over the past few weeks Gareth's done a lot of work on that. So I'd like Gareth just to briefly bring committee members up to speed on the capital working group, and perhaps to invite colleagues to consider putting themselves forward for membership of that reconstituted group. Gareth.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. At the last meeting, and I noticed that it was well recording in the earlier minutes, is I gave an outline of the reasons why we wanted to resurrect the capital working group. They have been translated into terms of reference. We were also asked to broaden the scope of the working group to have a look at the education capital programme, and a draft of that element of this work was prepared, and I have received, following discussion, some very helpful comments from Jane, the Section 151 officer, which we've incorporated into the broader terms of reference. So they now cover the updated capital programme and include the education working programme. So we're all set now to get the group going. Kath is looking at dates. I'd like to have volunteers to join the group, but I understand from Kath that we can't really do this until after the AGM, the council's AGM, so we know what elected members will be on the group going forward. Is that right, Kath?
We had the AGM last week.
Got that. We're there already.
Yeah.
We're there already, are we? Sorry, I was on
Yeah.
holidays last week.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's okay then. So I'd really like to have some willing volunteers to join. And
so you've got John.
You've got John, yeah.
You've got Pete.
Yeah. One or both of the new members would be great to get some fresh blood and some new thinking.
Yeah, I think that would be a really good idea. Can we give Adam and Claire a wee bit of thinking time? And
Sure.
I've promised them each a sort of online one-to-one, and perhaps if I kind of give Adam and Claire a wee bit of background as to what we're about with our working groups, that might help them decide which ones they may want to contribute to.
And maybe, Chair, that the first meeting of the working group is just of members, so we can bring people up to the same level of where we've been, where we're coming from, and where we're looking to go.
Yes,
rather
that's
than
a really good,
go
definitely
into it,
really good idea.
headlong. That'd be great.
Yeah, definitely.
Thanks.
Okay, so moving swiftly on, Pete, whistleblowing.
Yep. Yeah, thank you, Chair. Pleased to table the final report from the working group to committee, and I'd just like to again reiterate my thanks to members of the working group and to the officers for all their help and support through this project. Our in-depth reviews of the whistleblowing framework was undertaken by compiling fictional cases covering all scenarios we could think of at the time, and then testing these against the existing framework. As committee will see from this report, this led to following outcomes listed there, which are briefly updates to FAQs, updates to policy, but of course there's an important caveat there that whilst we felt the cases were very comprehensive and covered all known scenarios at the time, it is acknowledged that a true test will only be undertaken really when the policy is used in a real life situation. The policy is now to be presented to Standards Committee and the Union Policy Forum for their review as well. We also updated the letter templates, and there was a new flowchart that was agreed and signed off to aid understanding. A couple of actions that should be added to the work plan, which was also agreed, and they related to an annual review of the whistleblowing policy by Audit and Governance Committee, and also a review of a new annual report, which would be a report that would go beyond just numbers. And then finally, Chair, there's two recommendations for committee to consider today. Recommendation 1 is to ask the head of legal to consider amending section 22 of the council's constitution to include a link to the whistleblowing policy and the whistleblowing code, and at the same time to undertake a review of both documents to avoid any unnecessary duplication as well as ensuring consistency. Recommendation 2 is again for asking the head of legal to review the wording that's in the constitution and to look at that to see if it needs to be revised to provide additional clarity around the additional information that's now to be included in the annual report to come to this committee. So, Chair, that's the two recommendations I'd like to put in front of the committee today. And back to yourself.
No, thanks, Councillor Pete, and thanks very much for all the work that you've done in this space, and thanks to the officers who supported it extremely positively. I'll ask members if they're content with the two recommendations that Pete, as chair of the working group, are members content that those recommendations go forward to Cabinet in the way that Councillor Peter just described?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So, okay. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, colleagues. Thank you. Thanks.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks all.
Thank you.
Thank you, Pete.
And from me on the internal audit working group, we had a meeting a couple of weeks ago, and I think the main thing that the committee, Ian, you can chip in if you want, of course you can. But the main thing I was going to report to the committee, which I think they'd be particularly interested in, is that we've agreed with officers and with Ian from SWAP that we're working to change slightly the means of reporting on audit progress to the committee, so that Ian and his team will report on progress against the audit, delivering the audit plan, and a senior officer will report to the committee on progress against officers and departments discharging the recommendations of the audits so that there's a clear accountability, that Ian and his team are responsible and accountable for delivering the plan, and we need to know the progress that's been made there. And then officers are responsible for responding to audit findings and delivering the recommendations in the timeframes that have been agreed. And so we'll bring something to you, and Jane, as Head of Director of Corporate Services, obviously will have a role in that and influence over exactly what's produced. But I think it will drive a different sense of accountability for the different aspects of the internal audit end-to-end process. So that's the main thing I wanted to update colleagues on, that the working group was up to. Ian, is there anything I should have added?
Just briefly, I think in terms of the action tracking, we looked at reports and we found, well, my opinion was that we greatly improved the traction in terms of the number of the actions that are being implemented. And I think committee are probably quite interested to hear about the fact we considered Red Dragon. Again, we had an update from Red Dragon and Wayne came in, and Wayne had implemented the majority of the actions. The only ones that he hadn't were tied up with a new financial system, and they were longer term actions, and they changed the process there. So I think we were fairly assured that that was ongoing and on track. And the other one we listened to, we had an officer who spoke about Montgomeryshire Canal. And again, they confirmed they'd had an extension and things were progressing well. However, I think there were still some minor reservations that there is still a challenging timescale to complete some of the work. And so we may well speak to that section again, find out that they're still on track a bit further down the line. So that's all, really, I think.
Thanks very much. Thanks, Ian. Thanks, colleagues, and apologies for keeping you late, everyone. Just looking at the work programme, that work programme is just for the next 2 meetings, and to that we need to add in the next schedule of risk deep dives and the audit plan escalation and changes assurance paper that we spoke about at the beginning of this meeting. Any additional comments on the work programme?
Also, the items we've had to skip today.
Yes, the items. Oh, yes, the items we've skipped today: the GCRE and the social care case management item.
Yeah.
Councillor Pete.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Yeah, I know you said it just covers the next 2 months, and I know it's very early days, having just agreed the recommendations, but I guess we need to start thinking about when we want to review the whistleblowing policy, when the annual report comes, the new annual report comes to us.
Yeah, it will come. Carrie-Anne has got a longer schedule. She's just kind of given us the next couple of months on this page, but please be assured that there is a much longer work programme which Carrie-Anne is on top of. Jane.
Just on that policy, because we've got the policy tracker, the date will be flagged up on it. The responsible officer for drafting it will have it, so it should all just fit into that framework as well.
Yeah, hopefully it will all move along seamlessly now. In fact, Pete, is your hand up as a legacy hand?
Yeah, it was just a supplementary point, if I may. Thanks, Chair.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think just picking up on what Jane said there, I think there's like 3 yearly reviews or something of the policy, but we agreed that we as a group would look at it annually, even if there aren't any changes, just to make sure we were still happy with it. So the two don't necessarily tie together.
Oh, that's fine.
Right, okay. I'm going to close the meeting and thank all members for their attendance and their contributions today, and also thank all officers for their attendance and those who are in the teams who support those attending. We shouldn't forget that it takes quite a lot of hard work to produce an agenda and enable us to have a successful meeting. So thank you very much to everyone involved, and thanks to members and other councillors for their attendance. If members of the committee could remain on the call for 5 minutes so that we can do a little bit of reflection, and if others could now exit. Thank you very much, everyone, and have a good bank holiday.
So bye.
Thanks all.
Thank you.